The Descent of Man by Charles Darwin. Quotes. The Descent of Man by Charles Darwin explores the theory of human evolution and its connection to other species through natural selection. Published in 1871, the book extends Darwin's groundbreaking ideas from On the Origin of Species, applying them specifically to humanity. Darwin delves into the evidence supporting the descent of humans from earlier forms, considering topics like anatomical similarities, embryological development, and rudimentary structures. The book also introduces the concept of sexual selection, discussing how traits that aid in reproduction have influenced the evolution of both physical and behavioral characteristics in humans. It was a pivotal work that challenged long-standing beliefs about human uniqueness by placing humanity within the broader context of the animal kingdom. Quote 1. The inquirer would next come to the important point, whether man tends to increase at so rapid a rate as to lead to occasional severe struggles for existence, and consequently to beneficial variations, whether in body or mind, being preserved and injurious ones eliminated. This quote emphasizes the idea of natural selection, suggesting that the human species, like others, undergoes a constant struggle for survival. Beneficial traits are preserved through this struggle, while detrimental ones are phased out, illustrating how evolution shapes not just the physical aspects, but also the mental faculties of humans. Quote 2. It is notorious that man is constructed on the same general type or model as other mammals. All the bones in his skeleton can be compared with corresponding bones in a monkey, bat, or seal. Darwin points out the structural similarities between humans and other mammals, reinforcing the idea of common ancestry. These homologous structures provide evidence that all mammals, including humans, share a similar evolutionary origin, contradicting the notion of separate creation. Quote 3. Man is liable to receive from the lower animals and to communicate to them certain diseases as hydrophobia, variola, the glanders, syphilis, cholera, herpes, etc. This statement highlights the close biological relationship between humans and other animals. The fact that diseases can be transmitted across species boundaries indicates a similarity in tissue composition and immune response, supporting the theory of a shared evolutionary path. Quote 4. The embryo itself at a very early period can hardly be distinguished from that of other members of the vertebrate kingdom. Darwin illustrates that, during early development, human embryos bear a striking resemblance to those of other vertebrates. This resemblance serves as evidence of a common evolutionary origin, suggesting that humans and other animals follow similar developmental stages due to shared ancestry. Quote 5. It appears as if the posterior molar or wisdom teeth were tending to become rudimentary in the more civilized races of man. This observation indicates that certain human features, like wisdom teeth, are evolving to become less prominent or useful. It suggests that changes in human diet and lifestyle over time have rendered some ancestral traits obsolete, illustrating an ongoing process of evolution within the human species. Quote 6. The nictitating membrane, or third eyelid, with its accessory muscles and other structures, is especially well developed in birds, but in man, the quadrumana, and most other mammals, it exists, as is admitted by all anatomists, as a mere rudiment called the semilunar fold. Darwin explains that the third eyelid, which is fully functional in some animals, exists as a vestigial remnant in humans. This vestige serves as a reminder of our evolutionary past, demonstrating how certain features have lost their original function over time. Quote 7. Thus we can understand how it has come to pass that man and all other vertebrate animals have been constructed on the same general model, why they pass through the same early stages of development, and why they retain certain rudiments in common. In this quote, Darwin summarizes the evidence for common descent among vertebrates. The shared structural model, embryonic development stages, and vestigial features across species all point to a common evolutionary origin, arguing against the idea of individual acts of creation for each species. Quote 8. It is only our natural prejudice, and that arrogance which made our forefathers declare that they were descended from demigods, which leads us to demur to this conclusion. Darwin addresses the human reluctance to accept the idea of common descent due to cultural beliefs in human superiority. He implies that this resistance is rooted in an overestimation of humanity's uniqueness, suggesting that a more objective view acknowledges our shared evolutionary history. Quote 9. Rudimentary organs are eminently variable, and this is partly intelligible, as they are useless or nearly useless, and consequently are no longer subjected to natural selection. Here, Darwin discusses how vestigial structures, such as the appendix in humans, exhibit variability due to their lack of utility. Since these organs no longer serve a vital function, they are not influenced by natural selection, reinforcing the notion that evolutionary processes shape functional traits. Quote 10. In many monkeys, which do not stand high in the order, as baboons and some species of macacus, the upper portion of the ear is slightly pointed, and the margin is not at all folded inwards. But if the margin were to be thus folded, a slight point would necessarily project inwards. This quote provides an example of how certain physical traits in humans, like the structure of the ear, can be traced back to features in other primates. It illustrates how subtle changes in anatomy can hint at our evolutionary relationships with other species. Quote 11. No other explanation has ever been given of the marvelous fact that the embryos of a man, dog, seal, bat, reptile, etc. can at first hardly be distinguished from each other. Darwin emphasizes the striking similarity between the early embryos of different species, including humans. This observation supports the idea of a common evolutionary origin, suggesting that all vertebrates share a similar developmental process that reflects their shared ancestry. Quote 12. We see the influence of diversified conditions in the more civilized nations. For the members belonging to different grades of rank and following different occupations present a greater range of character than do the members of barbarous nations. Darwin suggests that societal factors, such as social rank and occupation, play a significant role in shaping the diversity of traits within more civilized societies. The differences in lifestyle and environmental conditions contribute to the range of physical and mental characteristics observed. Quote 13. The Quechua Indians have acquired chests and lungs of extraordinary dimensions. This quote illustrates how humans can adapt physically to their environment. Darwin describes how the Quechua Indians, living in high altitudes, have developed larger chests and lungs to accommodate the thin air. This adaptation demonstrates how natural selection can lead to inherited modifications in response to specific environmental conditions. Quote 14. Short sight and long sight certainly tend to be inherited. Darwin notes that eyesight characteristics, such as short-sightedness and long-sightedness, can be passed down through generations. This observation supports the concept of heredity in both physical traits and predispositions, emphasizing the importance of genetics in the process of natural selection. Quote 15. The frontal bone consists of a single piece, but in the embryo, and in children, and in almost all the lower mammals, it consists of two pieces separated by a distinct suture. Here, Darwin points out that certain features present in early human development resemble those found in other mammals, indicating a shared evolutionary history. The occasional persistence of these features into adulthood in some individuals serves as evidence of our ancestral traits. Quote 16. The primary or fundamental check to the of man is the difficulty of gaining subsistence and of living in comfort. Darwin identifies the struggle for resources as a crucial factor limiting human population growth. He suggests that access to food and basic needs is a fundamental check on the human population, influencing survival and reproduction, thus driving natural selection. Quote 17. With respect to the causes of variability, we are in all cases very ignorant. But we can see that in man, as in the lower animals, they stand in some relation to the conditions to which each species has been exposed. This quote acknowledges the mystery surrounding the root causes of variability in humans and other animals. However, it also suggests that environmental conditions and lifestyle play a significant role in influencing variability, thereby affecting evolutionary outcomes. Quote 18. There is a difference between arrested development and arrested growth, for parts in the former state continue to grow whilst still retaining their early condition. Darwin describes the phenomenon of arrested development, where certain features in humans and other animals retain their early forms despite continued growth. This occurrence is linked to evolutionary processes and the remnants of ancestral characteristics. Quote 19. The inferiority of Europeans, in comparison with savages, in eyesight and in the other senses, is no doubt the accumulated and transmitted effect of lessened use during many generations. Darwin argues that the decline in sensory acuity among Europeans compared to indigenous peoples is due to reduced reliance on these senses over generations. This highlights the impact of lifestyle changes on physical traits and the role of natural selection in adapting humans to their environments. Quote 20. Savages almost always marry. Yet, there is some prudential restraint, for they do not commonly marry at the earliest possible age. Darwin points out that even among so-called savages, there are social structures and norms regulating marriage. This prudential restraint reflects a level of societal organization, indicating that human behavior is not entirely driven by instinct, but also by cultural practices, which may serve to control population growth and improve survival prospects. Quote 21. It is manifest that man is now subject to much variability. No two individuals of the same race are quite alike. This observation highlights the inherent diversity within the human species. Such variability in physical, mental, and behavioral traits provides the raw material for natural selection, suggesting that evolution continues to shape humanity. Quote 22. If we look back to an extremely remote epoch, before man had arrived at the dignity of manhood, he would have been guided more by instinct and less by reason than are the lowest savages at the present time. Darwin imagines a time when early human ancestors operated primarily on instinct, akin to animals, before developing higher reasoning abilities. This quote suggests that the evolution of human intellect and morality was a gradual process, building upon more primitive instincts over time. Quote 23. Man, in the rudest state in which he now exists, is the most dominant animal that has ever appeared on this earth. Here, Darwin asserts that even in the most primitive conditions, humans are more dominant than any other animal. This dominance stems from intellectual faculties, social habits, and physical structure, emphasizing how these traits have contributed to the success and widespread presence of humans. Quote 24. Beneficial variations of all kinds will thus, either occasionally or habitually, have been preserved, and injurious ones eliminated. This quote encapsulates the concept of natural selection, applying it to human evolution. Darwin argues that variations advantageous to survival are retained and passed down through generations, while detrimental traits are gradually weeded out, shaping the evolution of mankind. Quote 25. The free use of the arms and hands, partly the cause and partly the result of man's erect position, appears to have led in an indirect manner to other modifications of structure. Darwin suggests that the use of arms and hands, enabled by bipedalism, influenced the evolution of other human features. This development allowed early humans to interact more effectively with their environment, fashion tools, and ultimately advance technologically and culturally. Quote 26. The belief that there exists in man some close relation between the size of the brain and the development of the intellectual faculties is supported by the comparison of the skulls of savage and civilized races, of ancient and modern people, and by the analogy of the whole vertebrate series. Darwin notes the correlation between brain size and intellectual capacity across different human groups and in the animal kingdom. This comparison suggests that the growth of the human brain played a significant role in the evolution of complex cognitive abilities, distinguishing humans from their ancestors and other species. Quote 27. We should bear in mind that modifications in structure or constitution which do not serve to adapt an organism to its habits of life cannot have been thus acquired. This quote reflects Darwin's assertion that changes in an organism's structure must be functional and beneficial to be naturally selected. In humans, traits that do not serve a purpose for survival or reproduction are unlikely to have persisted through evolutionary processes. Quote 28. Man alone has become a biped, and we can, I think, partly see how he has come to assume his erect attitude, which forms one of his most conspicuous characters. This quote highlights bipedalism as a unique and defining characteristic of humans. Darwin suggests that the evolution of an upright stance provided significant advantages, such as freeing the hands for other uses, which contributed to the progression of human capabilities and social organization. Quote 29. The small strength and speed of man, his want of natural weapons, etc., are more than counterbalanced, firstly, by his intellectual powers, through which he has formed for himself weapons, etc., though still remaining in a barbarous state, and, secondly, by his social qualities, which lead him to give and receive aid from his fellow men. This quote emphasizes how human evolution has been primarily driven by intellectual development and social cooperation. Despite physical vulnerabilities compared to other animals, humans have leveraged intelligence to create tools and weapons, enhancing their ability to survive. Social qualities, such as cooperation and mutual aid, have further strengthened human societies, compensating for individual physical weaknesses. Quote 30. We have seen in the last two chapters that man bears in his bodily structure clear traces of his descent from some lower form, but it may be urged that, as man differs so greatly in his mental power from all other animals, there must be some error in this conclusion. Darwin acknowledges the common argument against the theory of evolution, where the vast difference in mental abilities between humans and other animals might suggest a separate origin. However, he insists that humans' physical similarities with other animals indicate a shared evolutionary history, implying that the human mind evolved from simpler origins, just as the body did. Quote 31. Nor is the difference slight in moral disposition between a barbarian, such as the man described by the old navigator Byron, who dashed his child on the rocks for dropping a basket of sea urchins, and a Howard or Clarkson. Darwin spectrum of moral development within humans, contrasting the actions of so-called barbarians with those of individuals like Howard and Clarkson, known for their humanitarian efforts. This variation suggests that moral qualities, like intellectual ones, exist in a gradient and have evolved over time rather than being an exclusive human trait. Quote 32. The lower animals, like man, manifestly feel pleasure and pain, happiness and misery. This statement underlines the emotional similarities between humans and other animals. Darwin points out that the fundamental capacity to experience emotions is not unique to humans, but shared with many other species, indicating that these emotional faculties have deep evolutionary roots. Quote 33. The parents of many animals, trusting to the principle of imitation in their young, and more especially to their instinctive or inherited tendencies, may be said to educate them. Darwin observes that many animal species engage in a form of education, where parents rely on imitation and instinct in their offspring to teach necessary survival skills. This behavior suggests that learning and teaching are not purely human activities, but are present in other animals, revealing a continuum of cognitive abilities. Quote 34. The promptings of reason, after very short experience, are well shown by the following actions of American monkeys, which stand low in their order. Darwin illustrates that reasoning abilities are not exclusive to humans, providing examples from other animals, such as American monkeys. This demonstrates that problem-solving skills and the capacity to learn from experience are evolutionary traits shared across different species, reinforcing the idea of a shared mental continuum. Quote 35. It has often been said that no animal uses any tool, but the chimpanzee in a state of nature cracks a native fruit, somewhat like a walnut, with a stone. Here, Darwin challenges the claim that humans are the only tool-using species by pointing to instances where animals, such as chimpanzees, use objects in their environment to achieve specific goals. This evidence supports the argument that tool use, a sign of intelligence, is not unique to humans, but rather a behavior that has evolved in multiple species. Quote 36. The principle of imitation is strong in man, and especially, as I have myself observed, with savages. Darwin emphasizes that imitation is a powerful mechanism for learning and transmitting knowledge in humans, particularly in early societies. This principle is not exclusive to humans, but is also observed in other animals, suggesting that imitation is an essential evolutionary trait that has contributed to the development of complex behaviors. Quote 37. Hardly any faculty is more important for the intellectual progress of man than attention. Darwin underscores the critical role of attention in human intellectual development. The ability to focus on specific tasks or stimuli is vital for learning and adapting to the environment. He also notes that animals exhibit this faculty, indicating that attention is a fundamental skill that likely evolved in common ancestors of humans and other animals. Quote 38. The Duke of Argyll remarks that the fashioning of an implement for a special purpose is absolutely peculiar to man, and he considers that this forms an immeasurable gulf between him and the brutes. Darwin challenges the idea that tool-making is unique to humans by providing examples of animals using objects for specific purposes. He suggests that the evolution of tool-making in humans likely began with simple actions, such as using stones, which gradually led to more deliberate and sophisticated tool use. This quote underscores the idea that the cognitive abilities of humans and animals differ in degree rather than kind. Quote 39. It would be very difficult for anyone with even much more knowledge than I possess to determine how far animals exhibit any traces of these high mental powers. Darwin acknowledges the difficulty of measuring animal intelligence because it is nearly impossible to know what happens in an animal's mind. He points out that differences in interpretation and terminology further complicate the comparison of human and animal mental faculties, suggesting that our understanding of animal cognition may be more limited than we realize. Quote 40. If no organic being excepting man had possessed any mental power, or if his powers had been of a wholly different nature from those of the lower animals, then we should never have been able to convince ourselves that our high faculties had been gradually developed. Darwin argues that the presence of mental abilities in other animals provides evidence that human intellect evolved gradually from simpler forms. If human mental faculties were completely distinct from those of other animals, the idea of gradual development would be implausible. This supports the evolutionary perspective that human cognition is part of a continuum with other species. Quote 41. Articulate language is, however, peculiar to man, but he uses, in common with the lower animals, inarticulate cries to express his meaning, aided by gestures and the movements of the muscles of the face. Darwin notes that while humans uniquely use complex language, they share with animals the ability to communicate through cries, gestures, and facial expressions. This highlights the continuity between human and animal communication, implying that human language evolved from simpler forms of expression observed in other species. Quote 42. The fact of the higher apes not using their vocal organs for speech no doubt depends on their intelligence not having been sufficiently advanced. Darwin suggests that the reason higher apes do not speak is not due to an inability to use their vocal organs, but rather because their cognitive capacities are less developed than those of humans. This idea reinforces the concept that the evolution of language is closely tied to the development of intelligence. Quote 43. With respect to the origin of articulate language, language owes its origin to the imitation and modification of various natural sounds, the voices of other animals, and man's own instinctive cries, aided by signs and gestures. Darwin proposes that human language originated from the imitation of natural sounds and instinctive cries, which were then modified and developed into articulate speech. This view supports the idea that language evolved gradually and is deeply connected to earlier forms of animal communication, illustrating the evolutionary link between humans and other species. Quote 44. The formation of different languages and of distinct species, and the proofs that both have been developed through a gradual process, are curiously parallel. Darwin draws a parallel between the evolution of languages and species, suggesting that both have undergone gradual changes over time. Just as species evolve through variation and natural selection, languages develop through the modification and adaptation of words and sounds, reinforcing the idea of gradual evolutionary processes in different aspects of human life. Quote 45. It may be freely admitted that no animal is self-conscious, if by this term it is implied that he reflects on such points as whence he comes or whither he will go, or what is life and death, and so forth. Darwin admits that animals do not possess self-consciousness in the same way humans do, particularly concerning existential questions. However, he implies that other forms of awareness and reflection may still be present in animals, indicating that self-consciousness could be a complex trait that evolved to varying degrees in different species. Quote 46. The taste for the beautiful, at least as far as female beauty is concerned, is not of a special nature in the human mind, for it differs widely in the different races of man, and is not quite the same even in the different nations of the same race. Darwin points out that the perception of beauty is subjective and varies among different cultures and races. This variability suggests that the appreciation of beauty is not an inherent human trait, but one shaped by cultural and environmental influences, indicating the role of social and evolutionary factors in developing aesthetic preferences. Quote 47. There is no evidence that man was aboriginally endowed with the ennobling belief in the existence of an omnipotent God. Darwin states that belief in a higher deity is not inherent to humanity, implying that religious beliefs likely developed over time through cultural and intellectual evolution. He suggests that early humans may not have possessed such complex beliefs, indicating that spirituality and religion are products of human cognitive and social development. Quote 48. I fully subscribe to the judgment of those writers who maintain that of all the differences between man and the lower animals, the moral sense or conscience is by far the most important. Darwin emphasizes that the moral sense or conscience is the most significant factor distinguishing humans from other animals. He regards it as a faculty that drives humans to act based on principles of right and wrong, even when these actions may go against self-interest. This sense of morality has likely evolved from the social instincts present in humans and other social animals, becoming more complex with the development of human intellectual abilities. Quote 49. The social instincts lead an animal to take pleasure in the society of its fellows, to feel a certain amount of sympathy with them, and to perform very for them. This quote underscores the role of social instincts in shaping both animal and human behavior. Darwin suggests that the basic impulses to help and cooperate within a group are not unique to humans. They can also be seen in many social animals. These instincts, once combined with more advanced mental faculties, laid the foundation for the development of human morality and complex social structures. Quote 50. The common opinion how each member ought to act for the public good would naturally become, in a paramount degree, the guide to action. Darwin highlights the influence of societal norms on individual behavior, suggesting that community judgment significantly shapes one's moral decisions. As social creatures, humans are influenced by the collective beliefs and expectations of their community, guiding them to act in ways that benefit society as a whole. even when it requires personal sacrifice. Quote 51. Habit in the individual would ultimately play a very important part in guiding the conduct of each member. For the social instinct, together with sympathy, is, like any other instinct, greatly strengthened by habit. This statement points to the importance of habit in reinforcing social and moral behaviors. When individuals repeatedly act according to social instincts and sympathies, these actions become ingrained, further shaping their conduct. Habitual behaviors, once established, contribute to the formation of a moral framework that guides decisions and actions, strengthening the social fabric. Quote 52. Man could not have attained his present dominant position in the world without the use of his hands, which are so admirably adapted to act in obedience to his will. Darwin asserts that the physical structure of human hands, coupled with intellectual capabilities, played a crucial role in humanity's rise to dominance. The hand's dexterity allowed for tool-making and other activities essential for survival and advancement, reflecting the interplay between physical evolution and intellectual progress. Quote 53. It may be well first to premise that I do not wish to maintain that any strictly social animal, if its intellectual faculties were to become as active and as highly developed as in man, would acquire exactly the same moral sense as ours. Darwin recognizes that while other social animals may possess certain aspects of moral behavior, their moral sense would not necessarily mirror that of humans. This difference is due to the varying instincts and environmental pressures that have shaped each species' evolution. Therefore, human morality, with its complex considerations, is unique to our species' specific evolutionary journey. Quote 54. The more enduring social instincts conquer, the less persistent instincts. This quote suggests that in social animals, including humans, the instincts promoting group cohesion and cooperation often override more selfish or short-term impulses. The persistence of social instincts plays a key role in fostering moral behavior, driving individuals to act for the collective good, even when it conflicts with their immediate desires. Quote 55. We have not, however, as yet considered the main point, on which, from our present point of view, the whole question of the moral sense turns. Why should a man feel that he ought to obey one instinctive desire rather than another? Darwin introduces the complexity of moral decision-making, questioning why certain instincts are followed over others. He implies that the strength of social instincts, combined with the influence of societal norms and personal reflection, guides individuals in making moral choices. This process of selecting between competing impulses is central to the human experience of morality. Quote 56. The social instincts, which must have been acquired by man in a very rude state, and probably even by his early ape-like progenitors, still give the impulse to some of his best actions. Darwin proposes that the origins of human morality can be traced back to the social instincts present in early human ancestors. These instincts, which drive cooperation, empathy, and group cohesion, have evolved over time, becoming the foundation for many of the positive moral actions observed in human societies today. Quote 57. In the case of man, who alone can with certainty be ranked as a moral being, actions of a certain class are done for the good of others, are not called moral. Darwin acknowledges that while animals may display actions that resemble human morality, they lack the self-reflective capacity to consciously judge their actions as right or wrong. In humans, the ability to evaluate motives and choices gives rise to a distinctly moral character, setting humans apart as the only species capable of deliberate moral judgment. Quote 58. Why then does man regret, even though trying to banish such regret, that he has followed the one natural impulse rather than the other? And why does he further feel that he ought to regret his conduct? Darwin points out that humans have a unique capacity to feel regret over actions that go against their social instincts. This feeling of remorse arises from the conflict between temporary impulses and the more enduring social instincts. The presence of such regret signifies a key distinction between humans and other animals, reflecting a higher level of self-awareness and moral consideration. Quote 59. For man is enabled through his mental faculties to keep with an unchanged body in harmony with the changing universe. Darwin explains that human beings, unlike other animals, do not need to physically adapt their bodies to survive changing conditions. Thanks to their advanced mental abilities, humans can use tools, build shelters, and create clothing to protect themselves from various environments. This intellectual flexibility allows humans to thrive without the need for direct biological evolution in response to every environmental change. Quote 60. The intellectual and moral faculties of man would have been perfected or advanced through natural selection. Here, Darwin suggests that human intellect and morality evolved because they provided a survival advantage. In early human societies, individuals who were more intelligent, inventive, or cooperative were more likely to survive and pass on their traits. This process of natural selection led to the gradual development and refinement of human cognitive and moral capacities over time. Quote 61. A tribe rich in the above qualities would spread and be victorious over other tribes, but in the course of time it would be in its turn overcome by some other tribe still more highly endowed. Darwin highlights the competitive nature of human societies, where tribes with better social cohesion, courage, and cooperation tend to dominate others. However, this dominance is not permanent, as other tribes may eventually surpass them by developing even more advantageous qualities. This ongoing process contributes to the overall advancement of human social and moral standards. Quote 62. Do good unto others. To do unto others as ye would they should do unto you is the foundation stone of morality. Darwin recognizes the importance of empathy and reciprocity in forming the basis of moral behavior. This principle guides humans in their interactions with others, fostering social harmony and cooperation. It reflects the evolution of social instincts, which became increasingly complex as human societies grew and developed ethical codes. Quote 63. Our moral sense or conscience becomes a highly complex sentiment, originating in the social instincts, largely guided by the approbation of our fellow men, ruled by reason, self-interest, and in later times by deep religious feelings. Darwin describes the development of the human conscience as a multifaceted process. It began with basic social instincts, was shaped by the desire for social approval, and evolved through reasoning and self-interest. Over time, religious and cultural influences further refined this moral sense, making it a complex and integral part of human behavior. Quote 64. The tribes, which included the largest number of men thus endowed, would increase in number and supplant other tribes. This quote suggests that tribes with more individuals possessing intellectual and moral virtues had a higher chance of survival and expansion. Through natural selection, such tribes gradually replaced others, thereby contributing to the progress and spread of human civilization. This process underscores how collective qualities, rather than just individual traits, played a crucial role in human evolution. Quote 65. Obedience is of the highest value, for any form of government is better than none. Darwin argues that social order and governance are essential for the success of human societies. Obedience to leaders and societal rules helps maintain structure and cooperation, allowing a community to function effectively. Without this order, chaos would prevail, hindering progress and survival. Quote 66. Although civilization thus checks in many ways the action of natural selection, it apparently favors the better development of the body by means of good food and the freedom from occasional hardships. Darwin observes that while civilization reduces the impact of natural selection on humans by protecting the weak and vulnerable, it also promotes physical well-being. Access to better nutrition and protection from environmental threats contributes to the overall health and endurance of individuals. which can indirectly influence the progression of human evolution. Quote 67. Man accumulates property and bequeaths it to his children, so that the children of the rich have an advantage over the poor in the race for success, independently of bodily or mental superiority. Here, Darwin acknowledges the role of wealth and social status in human societies. The accumulation and inheritance of property create disparities that can affect the success of individuals, sometimes regardless of their physical or intellectual capabilities. This observation hints at the complexities of human evolution within the structures of civilization. Quote 68. Progress seems to depend on many concurrent favorable conditions, far too complex to be followed out. Darwin points out that human advancement is not solely the result of natural selection or any single factor. Progress requires a combination of various favorable circumstances, such as climate, resources, social organization, and cultural developments. This complexity makes it challenging to predict or fully understand the paths of human evolution. Quote 69. Man is liable to numerous, slight, and diversified variations which are induced by the same general causes, are governed and transmitted in accordance with the same general laws, as in the lower animals. Darwin emphasizes that human beings, like other animals, undergo various small and diverse changes governed by natural selection and heredity. This statement suggests that humans are subject to the same evolutionary processes as other species, reinforcing the idea that humans and animals share a common ancestry. Quote 70. Man has multiplied so rapidly that he has necessarily been exposed to struggle for existence, and consequently to natural selection. This quote highlights the impact of rapid population growth on human evolution. As the human population expands, individuals are inevitably subjected to competition for resources, leading to natural selection. This struggle for existence ensures that advantageous traits are preserved and passed on to future generations. Quote 71. If the origin of man had been wholly different from that of all other animals, these various appearances would be mere empty deceptions, but such an admission is incredible. Darwin argues that the physical and behavioral similarities between humans and other animals are best explained by shared evolutionary origins. He finds it unreasonable to view these resemblances as mere coincidences, suggesting instead that they are evidence of a common lineage linking humans to other life forms. Quote 72. Spiritual powers cannot be compared or classed by the naturalist, but he may endeavor to show, as I have done, that the mental faculties of man and the lower animals do not differ in kind, although immensely in degree. Here, Darwin acknowledges that while spiritual aspects of humanity may lie outside the realm of scientific comparison, the mental faculties of humans and animals are not fundamentally different. The difference lies in the extent and complexity of these faculties, indicating a continuum rather than a stark divide between humans and other species. Quote 73. A difference in degree, however great, does not justify us in placing man in a distinct kingdom. Darwin points out that despite the significant differences in mental capabilities between humans and other animals, these differences are not sufficient to place humans in an entirely separate biological category. This underscores his argument that humans are part of the natural evolutionary continuum, not a separate creation. Quote 74. The points of resemblance must not consist of adaptations to similar habits of life. Two animals may, for instance, have had their whole frames modified for living in the water, and yet they will not be brought any nearer to each other in the natural system. Darwin cautions against classifying species solely based on similar adaptations, as different species can independently evolve similar traits to adapt to comparable environments. True evolutionary relationships are better indicated by fundamental structural similarities that are not directly tied to specific lifestyles, reflecting shared ancestry. Quote 75. The greater number of naturalists have placed man in a separate order, Recently, many of our best naturalists have recurred to the view first propounded by Linnaeus, so remarkable for his sagacity, and have placed man in the same order with the quadrumana, under the title of the primates. Darwin notes the shift among naturalists toward classifying humans within the same order as primates, as originally proposed by Linnaeus. This classification reflects the recognition of the extensive anatomical and genetic similarities between humans and other primates, reinforcing the concept of a shared evolutionary history. Quote 76. There is no justification for placing man in a distinct order. Darwin asserts that the differences between humans and other primates, while significant, do not warrant placing humans in a separate biological order. He believes that humans are best understood as part of the larger primate family, further illustrating his view of human evolution as part of the broader natural world. Quote 77. Our early progenitors, at this or some earlier period, were no doubt arboreal in their habits, and frequented some warm, forest-clad land. Darwin speculates on the early evolutionary history of humans, suggesting that our ancestors lived in trees within warm, forested environments. This arboreal lifestyle influenced the development of traits such as grasping hands, binocular vision, and an upright posture, contributing to the evolution of modern human characteristics. Quote 78. If we imagine 3 lines of descent proceeding from a common stock, it is quite conceivable that 2 of them might, after the lapse of ages, be so slightly changed as still to remain as species of the same genus, whilst the 3rd line might become so greatly modified as to deserve to rank as a distinct subfamily, family, or even order. Darwin illustrates the concept of evolutionary divergence, where different lineages originating from a common ancestor can evolve at varying rates and to different extents. This idea helps explain why some species, including humans, show significant changes compared to their closest relatives, while others remain relatively unchanged. Quote 79. The nature and value of specific characters, application to the races of man, arguments in favor of and opposed to ranking the so-called races of man as distinct species. Darwin discusses the debate about whether the human races should be considered separate species. He emphasizes that differences in physical characteristics among human races can be comparable to those found in other animal species. The complexity and constancy of these traits make it challenging to classify humans definitively, highlighting the blurred line between species and varieties. Quote 80. Constancy of character is what is chiefly valued and sought for by naturalists. This quote underlines the importance of stable traits when distinguishing between species. Darwin points out that in order to classify organisms, including humans, scientists look for characteristics that remain consistent over time. The difficulty in doing so with human races, due to their variability and overlap in traits, complicates the question of whether different human races represent distinct species. Quote 81. The various races, when carefully compared and measured, differ much from each other, as in the texture of the hair, the relative proportions of all parts of the body, the capacity of the lungs, the form and capacity of the skull, and even in the convolutions of the brain. Darwin acknowledges that there are significant physical differences among human races. These differences encompass a wide range of traits, from hair texture to brain structure. Despite these variations, he implies that they do not necessarily justify classifying human races as separate species, as such variations are also found within other animal species. Quote 82. The distinctive characters of all the races were highly variable. This statement emphasizes that the traits used to distinguish human races are not constant and can vary significantly even within the same group. Darwin suggests that this variability makes it difficult to define human races as separate species, as true species typically exhibit stable, distinct characteristics. Quote 83. The most weighty of all the arguments against treating the races of man as distinct species is that they graduate into each other. Darwin highlights that human races blend into one another without clear boundaries, making it hard to categorize them as separate species. This continuity in physical and mental traits across races suggests a shared origin and evolution, supporting the idea that all humans belong to a single species. Quote 84. The races of man are not sufficiently distinct to inhabit the same country without fusion. Darwin observes that human races, when brought into proximity, tend to interbreed and merge rather than remaining separate. This natural tendency to form mixed populations indicates that human races lack the reproductive barriers typical of distinct species, reinforcing the view of humans as a single, interconnected species. Quote 85. Man has been studied more carefully than any other animal, and yet there is the greatest possible diversity amongst capable judges, whether he should be classed as a single species or race. Here, Darwin acknowledges the ongoing debate among scientists regarding human classification. Despite extensive study, experts continue to disagree on whether humanity constitutes one species or multiple, reflecting the complexity of human variation and the challenges of defining species in evolutionary terms. Quote 86. It is, however, possible, though far from probable, that the early progenitors of man might formerly have diverged much in character until they became more unlike each other than any now existing races, but that subsequently they converged in character. Darwin entertains the idea that early human ancestors may have once been more diverse, but later evolved to resemble each other more closely. This convergence of traits could explain the similarities among present human races, while also suggesting a shared evolutionary history, even if early human populations were initially more distinct. Quote 87. The question whether mankind consists of one or several species has of late years been much discussed by anthropologists. This quote captures the scientific debate surrounding human evolution. Darwin notes that some scholars, monogenists, argue for a single origin of humanity, while others, polygenists, believe in multiple origins. He implies that the theory of evolution offers a unifying explanation, suggesting that all human races descended from a common ancestor despite their differences. Quote 88. We thus see that many of the wilder races of man are apt to suffer much in health when subjected to changed conditions or habits of life, and not exclusively from being transported to a new climate. Darwin observes that changes in lifestyle or environment can negatively impact the health of indigenous populations. This effect is not limited to relocation to new climates, but includes alterations in daily habits, which can lead to decreased fertility and overall health issues. It indicates that humans, particularly those in less developed societies, can be sensitive to changes in conditions similar to other animal species. Quote 89. Man in his wild condition seems to be, in this respect, almost as susceptible as his nearest allies, the anthropoid apes, which have never yet survived long, when removed from their native country. Darwin suggests that, like apes, humans in their natural state are highly sensitive to environmental changes. The difficulty in adapting to new surroundings often leads to health problems and decreased survival, indicating that both humans and their closest relatives share an evolutionary trait of being finely tuned to specific conditions. Quote 90. The reproductive system can be shown to be susceptible to an extraordinary degree to changed conditions of life, and this susceptibility leads both to beneficial and to evil results. Darwin points out that the reproductive system is particularly vulnerable to changes in environmental and lifestyle conditions. While some changes may promote health and fertility, others can result in sterility and the decline of populations. This observation highlights the delicate balance between organisms and their environments, affecting their ability to thrive or perish. Quote 91. It is remarkable how slight a change in the conditions often induces sterility in a wild animal when captured. Darwin notes that even minimal changes in an animal's environment can lead to infertility, a phenomenon observed in many wild animals taken into captivity. This sensitivity to new conditions may also apply to humans, particularly those living in wild or indigenous states, further emphasizing the fragile nature of reproductive health in changing environments. Quote 92. Civilized races can certainly resist changes of all kinds far better than savages, and in this respect, they resemble domesticated animals. Darwin observes that people in more developed societies, much like domesticated animals, are better equipped to handle environmental changes. This resilience may result from exposure to diverse conditions, migrations, and crossbreeding, offering some immunity against factors that might otherwise cause sterility or health decline in less adaptable populations. Quote 93. A cross with civilized races at once gives to an aboriginal race an immunity from the evil consequences of changed conditions. This statement suggests that interbreeding between indigenous and civilized populations can confer a degree of resilience to environmental changes. The infusion of genetic diversity may strengthen the offspring, providing them with a better chance of survival and adaptation, contrasting with the vulnerability observed in isolated, pure-blooded populations. Quote 94. The cases which I have here given all relate to Aborigines, who have been subjected to new conditions as the result of the immigration of civilized men. Darwin reflects on the impact of European colonization on indigenous peoples, noting how their exposure to new conditions, such as changes in diet, lifestyle, and environment, often leads to a decline in health and fertility. These examples illustrate how sudden shifts imposed by contact with more technologically advanced societies can disrupt the delicate equilibrium of native populations. Quote 95. It is the same problem as that presented by the extinction of one of the higher animals, of the fossil horse, for instance. Darwin compares the decline of certain human races to the extinction of animal species. He implies that the factors leading to extinction, such as environmental changes, competition, and new pressures, apply to both humans and animals. This parallel reinforces his argument that humans are not exempt from the natural laws governing survival and evolution. Quote 96. The little understood principle of correlated development has sometimes come into action, as in the case of great muscular development and strongly projecting supraorbital ridges. Darwin introduces the concept of correlated development, where changes in one trait may lead to changes in another, often unrelated trait. This idea suggests that the physical differences among human races might not always be directly adaptive, but rather the result of complex interactions between various developmental processes during evolution. Quote 97. Second, sexual selection, manner of action, excess of males, polygamy, the male alone generally modified through sexual selection, eagerness of the male, variability of the male, choice exerted by the female, sexual compared with natural selection. Darwin introduces the concept of sexual selection, explaining how secondary sexual characteristics like size, strength, and coloration can evolve through competition for mates. He points out that sexual selection operates differently from natural selection, primarily affecting males who compete for the attention of females. This process results in the evolution of diverse traits, influenced by female preference and male rivalry, creating a complex dynamic distinct from survival-based natural selection. Quote 98. Sexual selection depends on the advantage which certain individuals have over others of the same sex and species solely in respect of reproduction. This statement emphasizes that sexual selection is driven by competition for reproductive success. The advantage may stem from physical traits, behaviors, or abilities that make an individual more appealing or successful in mating. Unlike natural selection, which focuses on survival, sexual selection revolves around traits that increase the chances of passing on one's genes, influencing the evolution of species. Quote 99. When the male has found the female, he sometimes absolutely requires prehensile organs to hold her. Darwin highlights the role of physical adaptations in sexual selection. In some species, males have developed specialized structures to secure and hold on to females during mating. These adaptations enhance their reproductive, demonstrating how sexual selection can lead to the evolution of specific traits that facilitate reproduction. Quote 100. There are many other structures and instincts which must have been developed through sexual selection, such as the weapons of offense and the means of defense of the males for fighting with and driving away their rivals. Darwin describes how sexual selection can lead to the development of various traits, including weapons like antlers or horns and aggressive behaviors in males. These traits arise from competition with rivals for mating opportunities, where only the strongest or most dominant males can successfully pass on their genes. This process illustrates how sexual selection shapes both physical characteristics and behaviors in the animal kingdom. Quote 101. We cannot doubt that, though led by instinct, they know what they are about, and consciously exert their mental and bodily powers. Darwin suggests that animals engaged in mating displays or competitions are not merely acting on instinct, but also exhibit a form of awareness or intentionality in their actions. This implies a level of cognitive involvement in sexual selection, where animals are capable of deliberate efforts to attract mates or fend off rivals, contributing to the development of secondary sexual traits. Quote 102. Just as man can give beauty, according to his standard of taste, to his male poultry, so it appears that female birds in a state of nature have, by a long selection of the more attractive males, added to their beauty or other attractive qualities. Darwin draws a parallel between human selective breeding and natural sexual selection. He posits that female birds, through their preference for more attractive males, have shaped traits like plumage or song. This selective process, akin to artificial selection practiced by humans, results in the enhancement of specific features over generations. Quote 103. The practice of polygamy leads to the same results, as would follow from an actual inequality in the number of the sexes. Darwin explains how polygamy influences sexual selection. When males mate with multiple females, it creates competition among males for mating opportunities. This dynamic fosters the evolution of traits that give males an advantage in securing mates, leading to a higher prevalence of secondary sexual characteristics within the population. Quote 104. Throughout the animal kingdom, when the sexes differ in external appearance, it is, with rare exceptions, the male which has been the more modified. Darwin points out that in most species, males exhibit more pronounced secondary sexual characteristics than females. This pattern is attributed to the male's role in actively seeking and competing for mates, driven by strong reproductive instincts. The evolution of these male-specific traits is a hallmark of sexual selection, setting the sexes apart in appearance and behavior. Quote 105. The female, on the other hand, with the rarest exceptions, is less eager than the male. As the illustrious Hunter long ago observed, she generally requires to be courted. Here, Darwin underscores the more passive role of females in sexual selection. Unlike males, females tend to be choosier and less aggressive in seeking mates, often waiting to be courted. This selectivity shapes the course of sexual selection, as males evolve traits to attract and persuade females, influencing the evolutionary trajectory of species. Quote 106. The advantages which favored males derive from conquering other males in battle or courtship, and thus leaving a numerous progeny, are in the long run greater than those derived from rather more perfect adaptation to their conditions of life. Darwin suggests that the traits which help males to win over rivals in competition for mates, even if they may slightly hinder survival, are more beneficial for passing on genes to the next generation. This implies that sexual selection can drive the development of certain features to extremes, as long as they increase reproductive success, even if they come at a cost to individual survival. Quote 107. The development of certain structures, of the horns, for instance, in certain stags, has been carried to a wonderful extreme. and in some cases to an extreme which, as far as the general conditions of life are concerned, must be slightly injurious to the male. Here, Darwin observes that sexual selection can lead to the growth of certain features, like the horns in stags, to such a degree that they might actually be detrimental to survival. These traits are favored not because they help the animal adapt to its environment, but because they provide an advantage in mating competition, showing the power of selection in shaping species. Quote 108, "We see this distinction in those characters which are transmitted through the early years of life, but are developed only at maturity or during old age." This quote highlights the difference between the transmission and development of inherited traits. Some characteristics are passed down from generation to generation, but only become visible later in life, often at sexual maturity. This distinction is important in understanding how sexual selection affects the evolution of species by influencing which traits are expressed and at what life stage. Quote 109, "Many cases will hereafter be given, where the female exhibits, more or less perfectly, to the male, in whom they must have been first developed and then transferred to the female." Darwin notes that certain traits initially evolved in males through sexual selection can eventually appear in females. This transfer of characteristics between sexes occurs over generations, suggesting that the mechanisms of inheritance and sexual selection can influence the development of traits beyond their original purpose, or the sex in which they first appeared. Quote 110, "In all cases of reversion, characters are transmitted through 2, 3, or many more generations, and are then developed under certain unknown favorable conditions." This statement refers to the phenomenon of reversion, where a trait that was present in an earlier ancestor reappears after being absent in several generations. Such traits can remain latent, being passed down without expression, until specific conditions trigger their development, illustrating the complexity and unpredictability of inheritance in evolution. Quote 111, "A new character, appearing in a young animal, whether it lasts throughout life or is only transient, will, in general, reappear in the offspring at the same age and last for the same time." Darwin explains the principle of inheritance at corresponding periods of life, indicating that traits tend to appear in offspring at the same stage of development as they did in their parents. This pattern suggests that the timing of trait expression is an inherited aspect, the predictability of how and when certain features manifest in future generations. Quote 112, "The sexes often differ in what Hunter has called secondary sexual characters, which are not directly connected with the act of reproduction." Darwin points out that males and females frequently exhibit differences in traits known as secondary sexual characteristics, which do not directly involve reproduction. These features, such as plumage, antlers, or coloration, are typically developed through sexual selection and serve to attract mates or intimidate rivals, demonstrating the role of competition and preference in shaping physical attributes. Quote 113, "In the case of man, characters proper to each sex are transmitted to the same sex alone." This quote discusses how certain traits specific to one sex, such as facial hair in males or broader hips in females, are passed down exclusively to the corresponding sex. This mode of inheritance helps maintain the physical and behavioral distinctions between males and females, playing a significant role in the evolution of sexual dimorphism in humans. Quote 114, "The successive variations by which the adult male became modified did not generally occur much before the age for reproduction." Darwin suggests that the traits differentiating adult males from females and juveniles likely evolved close to the reproductive age. This timing indicates that sexual selection mainly acts on traits that appear around maturity, thereby enhancing the male's ability to compete for mates without affecting the developmental processes that occur earlier in life. Quote 115, "The season of the year, the poverty or wealth of the parents, residence in the country or in cities, the crossing of foreign immigrants, etc., all influence the proportion of the sexes." Darwin suggests that various factors, such as environmental conditions, socioeconomic status, and geographical location, can affect the ratio of male to female births. These influences may lead to fluctuations in the population's sex ratio, indicating that natural and social elements play a role in shaping the demographics of a species, including humans. Quote 116. Hardly any animal has been rendered so highly polygamous as the English racehorse, and we shall immediately see that his male and female offspring are almost exactly equal in number. Here, Darwin highlights that despite the extreme polygamous breeding practices in racehorses, the birth ratio between male and female offspring remains nearly equal. This suggests that polygamy does not necessarily lead to an increase in one sex over the other, providing insight into how sexual selection and breeding strategies affect, or do not affect, sex ratios in certain animals. Quote 117. With the domestic horse, or at least with the racehorse, the two sexes are produced in almost equal numbers. Darwin emphasizes that, in domestic horses, the number of male and female offspring is roughly equal. This observation supports the idea that, under controlled breeding environments, the natural tendency is to maintain a balanced sex ratio, suggesting an intrinsic equilibrium in reproductive patterns regardless of selective pressures. Quote 118. In regard to the common rat, I have received conflicting statements. Mr. R. Elliot, of Lakewood, informs me that a rat catcher assured him that he had always found the males in great excess, even with the young in the nest. Darwin points out the inconsistencies in reports regarding sex ratios in rats. While some observations indicate an excess of males, the data is not universally consistent. This discrepancy illustrates the complexity of determining sex ratios in the wild, where various factors, including environmental pressures and sampling methods, can influence findings. Quote 119. The males of the Cyprinidae likewise seem to be in excess, but several members of this family, Visamidsuns, the carp, tench, bream, and minnow, appear regularly to follow the practice, rare in the animal kingdom, of polyandry. Darwin discusses the unusual occurrence of polyandry in certain fish species, where one female is attended by multiple males during spawning. This behavior might explain the observed excess of males in these species, showing how specific mating systems can influence the population's sex distribution. Quote 120. I infer that with most species of Lepidoptera, the mature males generally exceed the females in number, whatever the proportions may be at their first emergence from the egg. Darwin infers that in butterflies and moths, Lepidoptera, adult males generally outnumber females, regardless of their initial numbers at birth. This could result from differences in survival rates, emergence times, or habits between the sexes, demonstrating the various factors that can affect sex ratios in different stages of an organism's life cycle. Quote 121. In the family of bees, Hermann Müller collected a large number of specimens of many species and reared others from the cocoons and counted the sexes. He found that the males of some species greatly exceeded the females in number. In others, the reverse occurred. Darwin highlights the variability in sex ratios among different bee species, indicating that some species have more males while others have more females. This diversity points to the influence of ecological and evolutionary pressures on the development of sex ratios, showing that these ratios can vary significantly even within a related group of organisms. Quote 122. With animals living in herds or troops, in which the males come to the front and defend the herd, as with the bisons of North America and certain baboons, it is conceivable that a male-producing tendency might be gained by natural selection. Darwin suggests that in social animals where males play a defensive role, there might be an evolutionary advantage in producing more males. A higher number of males would enhance the herd's or troop's ability to protect itself, potentially influencing the population's sex ratio through natural selection. Quote 123. In no case, as far as we can see, would an inherited tendency to produce both sexes in equal numbers, or to produce one sex in excess, be a direct advantage or disadvantage to certain individuals more than to others. Darwin reflects on the complexity of sex ratio evolution, stating that the tendency to produce equal numbers of males and females does not provide a direct advantage to individual organisms. This statement highlights the intricate nature of sex ratio dynamics, suggesting that the forces shaping these ratios are more complex than simple natural selection acting on individuals. Quote 124. As the males and females of many animals differ somewhat in habits and are exposed in different degrees to danger, it is probable that in many cases, more of one sex than of the other are habitually destroyed. Darwin notes that the differing behaviors and roles of males and females often result in varying levels of exposure to risks, leading to a higher mortality rate in one sex over the other. This difference in survival rates can influence the population dynamics and sex ratios within a species, illustrating the impact of natural selection and environmental pressures on the evolution of sexual characteristics. Quote 125. In the family of bees, Hermann Müller collected a large number of specimens of many species and reared others from the cocoons and counted the sexes. He found that the males of some species greatly exceeded the females in number. In others, the reverse occurred. This observation reveals the variability in sex ratios within different bee species. Darwin highlights that, while some species produce more males, others have a higher number of females, indicating that sex ratios are influenced by a complex interplay of ecological, genetic, and evolutionary factors, rather than a uniform rule across all species. Quote 126. We may conclude from the reasons already indicated, namely, the union of the two sexes in some of these animals, the permanently affixed condition of others, and the low mental powers of all, that such colors do not serve as a sexual attraction and have not been acquired through sexual selection. Darwin argues that the vibrant colors found in many lower animals, such as corals and sea anemones, are not the result of sexual selection. Since these creatures often have limited mobility, hermaphroditic reproduction, or simple mental capacities, their colors likely arise from other factors, such as chemical properties or structural features, rather than being used for attracting mates. Quote 127. With strictly social animals, such as bees or ants, which produce a vast number of sterile and fertile females in comparison with the males, and to whom this preponderance is of paramount importance, we can see that those communities would flourish best which contained females having a strong inherited tendency to produce more and more females. Darwin explains that in social species like bees and ants, natural selection favors colonies with a higher proportion of females, as they are essential for the maintenance and growth of the community. This inherited tendency toward producing more females ensures the colony's success and stability, highlighting how reproductive strategies adapt to social structures within a species. Quote 128. Contrivances by which the male holds the female, and which are indispensable for the propagation of the species, are independent of sexual selection, and have been acquired through ordinary selection. Darwin differentiates between traits that have evolved due to sexual selection and those resulting from natural selection. He emphasizes that features enabling the male to hold on to the female during mating are primarily products of natural selection, as they are crucial for successful reproduction, rather than serving to attract or compete for mates. Quote 129. We can, in our ignorance of most of the lowest animals, only say that their bright tints result either from the chemical nature or the minute structure of their tissues, independently of any benefit thus derived. Here, Darwin addresses the uncertainty around the bright coloration of lower animals, suggesting that these colors may arise purely from the chemical or physical properties of their tissues, rather than serving any adaptive purpose. This implies that not all physical characteristics have evolved through selection pressures, but some may be incidental features of an organism's biology. Quote 130. How, then, are we to account for the beautiful or even gorgeous colors of many animals in the lowest classes? It appears doubtful whether such colors often serve as a protection. Darwin raises the question of why lower animals possess vibrant colors, if they do not offer protective benefits. This uncertainty reflects the complexity of evolutionary biology, suggesting that some traits might not have a direct functional advantage and could instead result from other factors like genetic drift or inherent properties of biological materials. Quote 131. Certain cephalopoda, however, are characterized by one extraordinary sexual character, namely that the male element collects within one of the arms or tentacles, which is then cast off, and clinging by its sucking discs to the female, lives for a time an independent life. Darwin describes an unusual reproductive adaptation in some cephalopods, where a male's arm detaches and continues to function independently to transfer sperm to the female. This unique method of reproduction illustrates the diverse strategies that have evolved in different species, showcasing nature's inventive solutions to reproductive challenges. Quote 132. Although with the mollusca sexual selection does not seem to have come into play, yet many univalve and bivalve shells, such as volutes, cones, scallops, etc., are beautifully colored and shaped. Darwin points out that the beautiful colors and shapes of mollusk shells are not products of sexual selection, as they do not serve a role in attracting mates. Instead, these traits might result from other natural processes, such as the shell's growth patterns or environmental influences, emphasizing that not all aesthetic features in nature have evolved through sexual selection. Quote 133. The stridulation serves, as Westring also believes, to call or to excite the female, and this is the first case known to me in the ascending scale of the animal kingdom of sounds emitted for this purpose. Darwin observes that certain insects produce sounds, or stridulation, to attract or stimulate females, representing one of the earliest examples in the animal kingdom of sound being used for mating purposes. This behavior underscores the role of auditory signals in sexual selection, where the ability to produce sound becomes an essential characteristic in securing a mate. Quote 134. In neither of the two orders in this class, the millipedes and centipedes, can I find any well-marked instances of such sexual differences as more particularly concern us. Darwin notes the absence of prominent sexual differences in millipedes and centipedes. This suggests that in some species, the evolution of sexual dimorphism, traits that distinguish males from females, is not as pronounced or necessary, highlighting the diversity of reproductive strategies across the animal kingdom. Quote 135. It is astonishing how many different organs are worked in by nature for the seemingly insignificant object of enabling the male to grasp the female firmly. Darwin expresses wonder at the various physical adaptations that have evolved in male insects to hold on to females during mating. These structures, such as hooks, suckers, and modified legs, illustrate how sexual selection can drive the development of highly specialized features that serve a single but crucial reproductive function. Quote 136. With insects of all kinds, the males are commonly smaller than the females, and this difference can often be detected even in the larval state. Darwin points out that in many insect species, males are generally smaller than females, a size difference that often emerges early in development. This trend may be linked to reproductive roles, as females often need larger bodies to carry and lay eggs, whereas males may benefit from smaller size for mobility or maturation advantages. Quote 137. The males of some species are furnished with wings, whilst the females are wingless. The sexes differ in the form of their bodies, elytra, antennae, and tarsi. But as the signification of these differences are unknown, they may be here passed over. Darwin describes various physical differences between male and female insects, such as wing presence, body shape, and limb structures. However, he acknowledges that the purpose of many of these sexual dimorphisms is not well understood, emphasizing that the evolution of sexual characteristics is complex and can vary greatly among species. Quote 138. The males of certain South American butterflies have tufts of hair on the margins of the wings, and horny excrescences on the discs of the posterior pair. Darwin notes the presence of specialized structures in male butterflies, such as hair tufts and horn-like projections, which likely play a role in mating displays or courtship rituals. These traits are examples of secondary sexual characteristics that have evolved to increase reproductive success by making males more attractive to females. Quote 139. The legs belonging either to one of the anterior or of the posterior segments of the body are modified into prehensile hooks, which serve to secure the female. Darwin describes the adaptation of certain legs in male insects, which develop into hooks to hold on to females during mating. This specialization emphasizes the importance of physical modifications in facilitating successful reproduction, showcasing the diverse methods through which sexual selection can shape the anatomy of different species. Quote 140. The males, as Professor Westwood observes, are exceedingly ardent, seizing their partners round the neck with their sickle-shaped jaws, whilst the females use these organs for burrowing in sandbanks and making their nests. This quote highlights a dual purpose of certain anatomical structures in insects. While males use their jaws to grasp females during mating, females use the same structures for practical tasks like burrowing and nest building. This distinction in usage reflects how the same physical traits can evolve to serve different functions depending on the sex and its role in reproduction. Quote 141. It is not probable that their colors in any case have been gained as a protection. Mr. McLaughlin, who has closely attended to this family, writes to me that dragonflies, the tyrants of the insect world, are the least liable of any insect to be attacked by birds or other enemies, and he believes that their bright colors serve as a sexual attraction. Darwin points out that the vibrant colors of dragonflies are not likely for protective purposes, as they are rarely preyed upon. Instead, their striking colors probably evolved as a result of sexual selection, serving to attract mates. This suggests that in some species, visual appeal can become a key factor in reproduction, driving the development of bold coloration. Quote 142. It is an interesting fact, first noticed by Shelver, that, in several genera belonging to two subfamilies, the males on first emergence from the pupal state are colored exactly like the females, but that their bodies in a short time assume a conspicuous milky blue tint, owing to the exudation of a kind of oil. Darwin describes a phenomenon where male dragonflies initially resemble females, but later change color. This color change likely plays a role in sexual signaling, indicating readiness for mating. It demonstrates how secondary sexual characteristics, such as coloration, can evolve to aid in species recognition and mate selection. Quote 143. In the family of bees, especially in the solitary species, as I hear from the same entomologist, the sexes often differ in color. The males are generally the brighter, and in Bombus, as well as in Apathus, much more variable in color than the females. Darwin notes the presence of sexual dimorphism in bees, with males often exhibiting brighter and more varied coloration compared to females. This pattern aligns with sexual selection, where males evolve distinct features to attract females or compete with other males, highlighting the importance of visual traits in the mating process. Quote 144. It has been supposed by some authors that the light serves to frighten away enemies, and by others to guide the male to the female. Here, Darwin discusses the bioluminescence of certain insects, such as glowworms, and presents two theories about its purpose. The light could either deter predators or function as a beacon to attract mates. This dual possibility illustrates how a single characteristic can serve multiple functions in an organism's life. Quote 145. The males of some species are furnished with wings, whilst the females are wingless. The sexes differ in the form of their bodies, elytra, antennae, and tarsi. But as the signification of these differences are unknown, they may be here passed over. Darwin mentions several physical differences between males and females in certain insect species, While the exact reasons for these variations remain unclear, they underscore the diversity of secondary sexual characteristics that can arise during evolution, potentially influenced by factors such as mating habits, survival strategies, or ecological pressures. Quote 146. Many species do the same from distress or fear, if held so that they cannot escape. By striking the hollow stems of trees in the Canary Islands, Messrs. Wollaston and Crotch were able to discover the presence of beetles belonging to the genus Acales by their stridulation. Darwin describes how beetles produce stridulating noises when in distress, a sound that can also be used by researchers to locate them. This behavior highlights how sound production, while often associated with mating or territorial displays, can also serve as a defense mechanism or signal of the insect's presence in its environment. Quote 147. Sexual selection, which implies the possession of considerable perceptive powers and of strong passions, seems to have been more effective with the lamellicorns than with any other family of beetles. Darwin suggests that sexual selection has played a particularly significant role in shaping the characteristics of lamellicorn beetles. The development of traits such as horns, colors, and stridulation in these beetles indicates that mating competition and attraction have been strong evolutionary forces within this group. Quote 148. The conclusion that the horns have been acquired as ornaments is that which best agrees with the fact of their having been so immensely, yet not fixedly, developed, as shown by their extreme variability in the same species and by their extreme diversity in closely allied species. Darwin argues that the large, varied horns in certain beetles likely evolved as ornamental features through sexual selection. The significant variability within species and the diversity among related species suggest that these horns are not merely functional, but serve to enhance male attractiveness or social status within their populations. Quote 149. Beetles stridulate under various emotions, in the same manner as birds use their voices for many purposes, besides singing to their mates. Darwin notes that beetles produce stridulating sounds in response to different emotions, much like how birds use vocalizations for multiple reasons beyond attracting mates. This similarity in behavior suggests that sound production serves diverse functions, including communication, warning, and potentially courtship in various species, indicating a shared evolutionary significance of sound across different animal groups. Quote 150. The belief that the stridulation serves as a sexual call is supported by the fact that death ticks, Anobium tessellatum, are well known to answer each other's ticking, and, as I have myself observed, a tapping noise artificially made. This quote highlights how certain insects, such as death ticks, use sound as a means of communication, particularly in a mating context. Darwin points out that these insects not only respond to each other's sounds, but also to artificial noises, suggesting that stridulation is an important part of their mating behavior, likely evolved to facilitate partner attraction. Quote 151. It is probable that the two sexes of many kinds of beetles were at first enabled to find each other by the slight shuffling noise produced by the rubbing together of the adjoining hard parts of their bodies, and that as those males or females which made the greatest noise succeeded best in finding partners, rugosities on various parts of their bodies were gradually developed by means of sexual selection into true stridulating organs. Darwin theorizes that the evolution of stridulating organs in beetles may have begun with simple body movements producing sounds. Over time, individuals that made louder noises had a better chance of finding mates, leading to the development of specialized structures for sound production through sexual selection. This process demonstrates how a seemingly trivial trait can evolve into a significant characteristic through reproductive advantages. Quote 152. Several males may often be seen pursuing and crowding round the same female. Their courtship appears to be a prolonged affair, for I have frequently watched one or more males pirouetting round a female until I was tired, without seeing the end of the courtship. Darwin describes the courtship behavior of butterflies, where multiple males vie for the attention of a single female, often for an extended period. This prolonged display suggests that mating rituals involve more than mere physical attributes, possibly including stamina, persistence, and behavioral displays, all of which contribute to sexual selection and the evolution of specific traits in these species. Quote 153. Although butterflies are weak and fragile creatures, they are pugnacious, and an emperor butterfly has been captured with the tips of its wings broken from a conflict with another male. This observation reveals that even delicate species like butterflies engage in aggressive behaviors, especially during mating competitions. The physical damage from such encounters indicates that male butterflies are willing to fight for reproductive opportunities, showcasing how sexual selection can lead to combative behaviors even in seemingly fragile animals. Quote 154. No language suffices to describe the splendor of the males of some tropical species. Even within the same genus, we often find species presenting extraordinary differences between the sexes, whilst others have their sexes closely alike. Darwin marvels at the remarkable beauty of male butterflies in tropical species, highlighting the diversity of sexual dimorphism in coloration within the same genus. This variation suggests that sexual selection has played a significant role in shaping these aesthetic differences, influenced by factors like mate choice and environmental pressures across different species. Quote 155. In the genus Papilio, all the species of the Aeneas group are remarkable for their conspicuous and strongly contrasted colors, and they illustrate the frequent tendency to gradation in the amount of difference between the sexes. This quote points out the striking colors found in the butterfly genus Papilio, particularly in the Aeneas group. Darwin notes a gradation in sexual dimorphism within this group, ranging from minimal to extreme differences in color between males and females. This range of variation highlights how sexual selection can influence the evolution of coloration in complex and varying ways. Quote 156. In those groups in which the sexes differ, the females usually somewhat resemble the males, so that when the males are beautiful to an extraordinary degree, the females almost invariably exhibit some degree of beauty. Darwin observes that in species where males are highly decorated, females often display a similar, albeit less pronounced, beauty. This pattern suggests that the evolution of male ornamentation through sexual selection can also impact female traits, either through genetic inheritance or through evolutionary pressures that maintain some degree of resemblance between the sexes. Quote 157. We know that ants and certain lamellicorn beetles are capable of feeling an attachment for each other, and that ants recognize their fellows after an interval of several months. Darwin references the capacity for complex social behaviors and memory in ants and beetles, indicating a level of cognitive ability that may extend to appreciation or preference for certain mates. This capacity for recognition and attachment implies that sexual selection in these insects could involve more than mere physical characteristics, potentially encompassing social interactions and long-term bonds. Quote 158. But converse cases occur, though rarely, in which the females are more brilliant than the males. And here, as I believe, the males have selected the more beautiful females and have thus slowly added to their beauty. Darwin acknowledges that while it is common for males to be more ornate due to sexual selection, there are rare instances where females are more brightly colored. In these cases, he suggests that males might have been the choosers, selecting more beautiful females over generations. This reverses the usual pattern of sexual selection and illustrates the flexibility of mate selection dynamics in nature. Quote 159. In all the cases in which the more common form of equal inheritance by both sexes has prevailed, the selection of bright-colored males would tend to make the females the bright-colored, and the selection of dull-colored females would tend to make the males dull. Darwin explains how traits such as coloration can be inherited by both sexes. If bright-colored males are consistently chosen as mates, females may also inherit and express these colors. Conversely, if dull-colored females are selected for protection or other reasons, the resulting offspring may carry these dull traits, affecting both sexes over time. Quote 160. When the sexes resemble each other and both are obscurely colored, there is no doubt that they have been in a multitude of cases so colored for the sake of protection. Here, Darwin suggests that when both males and females of a species share a muted coloration, it likely serves as a protective mechanism. Camouflage and inconspicuousness can provide an evolutionary advantage by helping individuals avoid predators, illustrating how natural selection shapes coloration differently than sexual selection. Quote 161. It is almost certain that she has sometimes been made brilliant, so as to imitate other protected species inhabiting the same district. Darwin discusses the phenomenon of mimicry, where some female insects have evolved bright colors to resemble other species that are protected from predators. This mimicry serves as a form of defense, enhancing their chances of survival by deceiving predators into thinking they are a less palatable or dangerous species. Quote 162. As some writers have felt much difficulty in understanding how the first steps in the process of mimicry could have been effected through natural selection, it may be well to remark that the process probably commenced long ago between forms not widely dissimilar in color. Darwin addresses the difficulty in understanding how mimicry could evolve, suggesting that it likely began among species with slight initial similarities in color. These small variations would have provided a slight advantage, gradually intensifying through natural selection until the mimicry became more pronounced. This explanation illustrates how complex adaptations can originate from simple beginnings. Quote 163. If we admit that the females of the Homoptera and Orthoptera appreciate the musical tones of their male partners, and that the various instruments have been perfected through sexual selection, there is little improbability in the females of other insects appreciating beauty in form or color. Darwin proposes that if females in certain insect orders choose mates based on sounds produced by males, it is reasonable to think that females in other species might similarly appreciate visual traits like form or color. This perspective extends the principle of sexual selection, suggesting that female preferences can drive the evolution of diverse and elaborate male characteristics. Quote 164. That the females in most or all the orders would have the power of rejecting any particular male is probable from the many singular contrivances possessed by the males, such as great jaws, adhesive cushions, spines, elongated legs, etc., for seizing the female. For these contrivances show that there is some difficulty in the act, so that her concurrence would seem necessary. Darwin argues that the elaborate structures males develop to grasp females during mating indicate that females likely have some degree of choice in the selection process. The existence of these contrivances suggests that mating is not simply a matter of male dominance, but also requires the female's cooperation, pointing to an element of selective preference in female insects. Quote 165. It is instructive to reflect on the wonderful diversity of the means for producing sound, possessed by the males alone or by both sexes, in no less than 6 orders. Darwin highlights the variety of sound-producing mechanisms found in insects, which are often used for mating purposes. This diversity reflects the influence of sexual selection in shaping communication and signaling methods within different species, illustrating the extent to which reproductive strategies can drive the evolution of complex traits. Quote 166. The coloring of insects is a complex and obscure subject. When the male differs slightly from the female, and neither are brilliantly colored, it is probable that the sexes have varied in a slightly different manner, and that the variations have been transmitted by each sex to the same without any benefit or evil thus accruing. Darwin acknowledges the complexity of insect coloration, suggesting that minor differences in coloration between males and females may arise through random variations that are passed down without necessarily providing a significant advantage or disadvantage. This highlights the role of both sexual and natural selection in influencing the appearance of species. Quote 167. The males of many fish fight for the possession of the females. Darwin notes that in the animal kingdom, particularly among fish, males often engage in battles to secure mates. This behavior highlights the competitive nature of reproduction, where males with superior strength or tactics gain access to females, thus potentially passing on their genes to the next generation. Such fighting is a form of sexual selection, shaping the evolution of physical traits that enhance fighting ability. Quote 168. In many species, the male alone is ornamented with bright colors, or these are much brighter in the male than the female. Darwin points out that in numerous fish species, males are often more brightly colored than females. This phenomenon indicates that male coloration may have evolved as a means to attract females or to outcompete rival males. The vivid colors serve as a form of sexual ornamentation, signaling health, vitality, and genetic fitness to potential mates. Quote 169. With respect to the courtship of fishes, other cases have been observed, besides that already given of the stickleback. Darwin observes that various fish species exhibit unique courtship behaviors beyond those of the stickleback. These behaviors may include nest building, performing elaborate displays, or changing colors to attract females. Such diversity in courtship highlights the complexity of reproductive strategies and the importance of sexual selection in shaping behaviors and traits in the animal kingdom. Quote 170. The teeth differ in the two sexes, as this is the case with many rays. In some fish species, such as rays, Darwin notes that males and females have different teeth structures. These differences suggest that males may have evolved specialized teeth either for fighting rivals or for grasping females during mating. The variation in tooth morphology exemplifies how sexual selection can lead to physical adaptations in each sex. Quote 171. During the breeding season, the body at the same time becomes more brightly colored. Darwin indicates that in certain fish species, males exhibit more intense coloration during the breeding season. This change likely serves to signal reproductive readiness to females, enhancing the male's chances of successful mating. The seasonal shift in color underscores the role of sexual selection in driving temporary changes in appearance to maximize reproductive success. Quote 172. The ova are fertilized immediately after being deposited, and when this process lasts for several days, as in the case of the salmon, the female, during the whole time, is attended by the male. Darwin explains that in species like salmon, fertilization occurs right after the female lays eggs, with the male remaining close by throughout this period. This behavior suggests a form of parental investment, where the male ensures the protection and fertilization of the eggs, indicating that sexual selection can also influence post-mating behaviors to increase offspring survival. Quote 173. In most of the Lophobranchi, pipefish, hippocampi, etc., the males have either marsupial sacs or hemispherical depressions on the abdomen, in which the ova laid by the female are hatched. Darwin describes how, in some species like seahorses and pipefish, males possess specialized structures for carrying and nurturing eggs. This unique reproductive role reversal highlights how sexual selection can lead to the evolution of traits that allow males to contribute significantly to offspring development, thus enhancing reproductive success. Quote 174. What, then, are we to conclude in regard to the many fishes, both sexes of which are splendidly colored? Darwin questions the purpose of bright coloration in species where both males and females are equally colorful. He suggests that the coloration might have originated in males through sexual selection and subsequently been transmitted to females. This idea reflects how sexual selection can sometimes lead to both sexes adopting traits initially evolved for attracting mates. Quote 175. With many lizards, the sexes differ slightly in color, the tints and stripes of the males being brighter and more distinctly defined than in the females. Darwin points out that in several lizard species, males often exhibit more vivid and sharply defined colors compared to females. This difference in coloration is likely a result of sexual selection, where brighter colors may give males an advantage in attracting mates. Such traits serve as signals of vitality and fitness, influencing female choice and shaping the evolution of these species. Quote 176. Both sexes of many species are beautifully colored exactly alike, and there is no reason to suppose that such colors are protective. In some species, both males and females possess equally striking colors that do not serve as camouflage or protection. Darwin suggests that these colors likely evolved through sexual selection, enhancing the attractiveness of both sexes. This pattern indicates that some traits, even if not directly beneficial for survival, can spread through a population due to their appeal in mate selection. Quote 177. Sexual selection, indeed, seems to have played almost as important a part with reptiles as with birds. And the less conspicuous colors of the females in comparison with the males cannot be accounted for, as Mr. Wallace believes to be the case with birds, by the greater exposure of the females to danger during incubation. Darwin emphasizes the role of sexual selection in reptiles, similar to its influence in birds. He argues that the muted coloration of female reptiles cannot solely be attributed to the need for camouflage during egg incubation, challenging Wallace's theory. This statement underscores the complexity of sexual dimorphism and the various factors contributing to the evolution of different traits in each sex. Quote 178. Male birds sometimes, though rarely, possess special weapons for fighting with each other. Darwin acknowledges that, while uncommon, some male birds have evolved specific physical adaptations for combat. These weapons are used to compete for mates, reflecting how sexual selection can lead to the development of traits that enhance a male's ability to win battles and secure reproductive success. Quote 179. The peacock with his long train appears more like a dandy than a warrior, but he sometimes engages in fierce contests. Darwin illustrates that despite the peacock's ornate and delicate appearance, it is capable of engaging in aggressive battles. The peacock's display and combativeness highlight the dual aspects of sexual selection, both ornamental displays for attracting mates and physical competition for asserting dominance. Quote 180. The season of love is that of battle, but the males of some birds, as of the gamefowl and ruff, and even the young males of the wild turkey and grouse, are ready to fight whenever they meet. Darwin observes that in many bird species, males are highly aggressive during the breeding season. However, certain species exhibit this combativeness year-round. This behavior underscores the influence of sexual selection in shaping male competition, where readiness to fight can confer advantages in securing mates and passing on genes. Quote 181. The males also endeavor to charm or excite their mates by love notes, songs, and antics, and the courtship is, in many instances, a prolonged affair. Here, Darwin describes the complex courtship rituals performed by male birds, which often involve songs and dances. These displays play a critical role in mate selection, indicating that females may choose partners based on traits such as vocal prowess, energy, and stamina, all of which reflect the male's fitness. Quote 182. Birds appear to be the most aesthetic of all animals, excepting, of course, man, and they have nearly the same taste for the beautiful as we have. Darwin suggests that birds possess a sense of aesthetics similar to humans, as evidenced by their elaborate songs, plumage, and courtship behaviors. This observation implies that the evolution of beauty and ornamental traits in birds is driven not only by survival, but also by the appreciation of beauty in mate selection. Quote 183. The curious love gestures of some birds have already been incidentally noticed, so that little need here be added. Darwin acknowledges the elaborate courtship displays performed by various bird species. These gestures, ranging from dancing and flying displays to vocal performances, serve to attract mates and exhibit the male's fitness and beauty. Such intricate behaviors underscore the role of sexual selection in shaping both the physical traits and behaviors of male birds, as their success in courtship can determine reproductive success. Quote 184. But the most curious case is afforded by three allied genera of Australian birds, the famous bowerbirds, no doubt the co-descendants of some ancient species, which first acquired the strange instinct of constructing bowers for performing their love antics. Darwin describes the unique courtship behavior of bowerbirds, which build intricate structures decorated with various objects to attract females. This behavior suggests a level of cognitive ability and aesthetic sense in these birds, showing how sexual selection can drive the evolution of complex behaviors that go beyond mere physical attributes, highlighting the importance of creativity and presentation in mate choice. Quote 185. The feathers on the front or back of the head consist of variously shaped feathers, sometimes capable of erection or expansion, by which their beautiful colors are fully displayed. Darwin notes that some male birds have specialized feathers on their heads that they can raise or spread to show off their vibrant colors. These feathers serve as visual signals to females during courtship, suggesting that sexual selection favors traits that enhance a male's attractiveness. The ability to manipulate these feathers to create impressive displays is a key component of their reproductive strategy. Quote 186. In an Indian bustard, Syphiotides auritus, the feathers forming the ear tufts, which are about 4 inches in length, also terminate in discs. This observation highlights how certain birds have evolved elaborate feather structures, such as the ear tufts in Indian bustards. These features serve as ornaments, often displayed during mating rituals, indicating the male's health and vitality. The presence of such specific characteristics underlines the influence of sexual selection in developing traits that may not have direct survival benefits, but play a critical role in reproductive success. Quote 187. The barbs of the feathers in various widely distinct birds are filamentous or plumose, as with some herons, ibises, birds of paradise, and gallinaceae. Darwin describes the feather structure of various bird species, which can range from simple filaments to intricate plumose forms. These diverse feather types often serve ornamental purposes, especially in courtship displays. Their evolution reflects the impact of sexual selection, where unique feather arrangements are developed to attract mates and signal genetic fitness. Quote 188. Nor need much be said on the wonderful difference between the sexes of many birds. The common peacock offers a striking instance. Darwin emphasizes the striking sexual dimorphism in birds, particularly in species like the peacock, where males possess elaborate and colorful plumage to attract females. This difference between the sexes is primarily driven by sexual selection, where males evolve traits that make them more appealing to potential mates, despite potential drawbacks such as increased visibility to predators. Quote 189. The elongated and golden-orange plumes which spring from beneath the wings of the Paradisea apoda, when vertically erected and made to vibrate, are described as forming a sort of halo. Darwin illustrates the remarkable courtship display of the male bird of paradise, whose ornate plumes create a halo-like effect when fully displayed. This display not only attracts females, but also demonstrates the male's health and vitality. The evolution of such elaborate traits showcases how sexual selection can lead to the development of extraordinary physical features designed solely for reproductive success. Quote 190. Ornaments of all kinds, whether permanently or temporarily gained, are sedulously displayed by the males, and apparently serve to excite, attract, or fascinate the females. Darwin observes that male birds put significant effort into showcasing their ornamental features, be they feathers, colors, or behavioral displays, to captivate females. This active display is a crucial part of the courtship process, emphasizing how sexual selection drives the evolution of traits aimed at enhancing a male's attractiveness and increasing his chances of securing a mate. Quote 191. When the sexes differ in beauty, or in the power of singing, or in producing what I have called instrumental music, it is almost invariably the male who surpasses the female. Darwin notes that in many bird species, males often display greater beauty, vocal ability, or musicality compared to females. This difference is primarily due to sexual selection, where males develop elaborate traits to attract females and outcompete rivals. The enhanced features in males, such as vibrant plumage or intricate songs, serve to increase their chances of securing a mate. Quote 192. It is far more difficult to decide what qualities determine the choice of the females, but here again we have some direct and indirect evidence that it is to a large extent the external attractions of the male, though no doubt his vigor, courage, and other mental qualities come into play. Darwin acknowledges the complexity of female mate selection, suggesting that while physical attractiveness plays a significant role, factors like the male's vitality, bravery, and behavioral traits also influence the female's choice. This highlights the multifaceted nature of sexual selection, where various attributes contribute to reproductive success. Quote 193. The lengthened period during which both sexes of certain birds meet day after day at an appointed place probably depends partly on the courtship being a prolonged affair and partly on reiteration in the act of pairing. Darwin describes the extended courtship rituals in some bird species, where males and females gather repeatedly over a period of time. This prolonged interaction suggests that courtship is not a quick or simple process, indicating that females may carefully evaluate potential mates based on their displays, behaviors, and persistence before choosing a partner. Quote 194. Certain strictly monogamous species likewise hold nuptial assemblages. This seems to be the case in Scandinavia with one of the ptarmigans, and their leks last from the middle of March to the middle of May. Darwin points out that even among monogamous birds, there are communal courtship gatherings known as leks. The participation in these assemblies, where males display and compete for female attention, indicates that mate choice is a critical part of reproductive success, even in species that form lasting pair bonds. Quote 195. Some males and females of the same species, inhabiting the same district, do not always please each other, and consequently do not pair. This statement suggests that mate selection in birds is not guaranteed simply by proximity. Males and females may exhibit preferences or aversions toward each other, leading to the possibility that some individuals do not find suitable mates, illustrating the selective nature of courtship and pairing in the animal kingdom. Quote 196. Magpies, jays, carrion crows, partridges, and some other birds are always seen during the spring in pairs, and never by themselves, and these offer at first sight the most perplexing cases. Darwin observes that certain bird species, especially those known for pairing behavior in spring, seem to maintain consistent pair bonds. This behavior poses intriguing questions about the mechanisms and nature of mate selection and loyalty within these species, indicating that factors beyond mere physical attraction may influence pairing. Quote 197. It is, however, difficult to obtain direct evidence of their capacity to appreciate beauty. Darwin admits the challenge in determining whether birds have a true sense of beauty when selecting mates. While male birds exhibit ornamental traits and displays, it remains uncertain if females consciously appreciate these attributes or if their preference is an instinctive response to signals of health and genetic fitness. Quote 198. Does the male parade his charms with so much pomp and rivalry for no purpose? Are we not justified in believing that the female exerts a choice, and that she receives the addresses of the male who pleases her most? Darwin emphasizes the idea that the elaborate displays and competitions among males are purposeful, serving to attract the attention of selective females. He argues that female choice plays a crucial role in sexual selection, shaping the evolution of ornamental traits in males, as females are likely to choose mates based on their appealing features. Quote 199. Individual differences between the members of the same species are admitted by everyone to occur under a state of nature. Darwin notes that variation within a species is widely recognized, indicating that members of the same species can exhibit a range of traits. These differences can serve as a foundation for natural and sexual selection, where advantageous variations may become more prevalent over time, leading to the evolution of distinct features within the species. Quote 200. The successive steps in the shading of the ball and socket ocelli can be followed out with equal clearness. Darwin describes the development of the intricate patterns found in the plumage of birds, like the Argus pheasant. The gradual evolution of these patterns, particularly the ball and socket appearance of the ocelli, demonstrates how small, incremental changes can accumulate to produce complex and striking traits, likely driven by sexual selection. Quote 201. With birds and many other animals, it seems to follow from the comparison of allied species that circular spots are often generated by the breaking up and contraction of stripes. Darwin suggests that circular spots in animal markings might have originated from the fragmentation and condensation of stripes over evolutionary time. This transformation illustrates the dynamic nature of animal patterns and how natural and sexual selection can influence the arrangement of pigments, resulting in diverse forms of ornamentation. Quote 202. Cases of gradation are important, as showing us that highly complex ornaments may be acquired by small successive steps. Darwin argues that complex traits, such as the ornamental feathers of birds, likely developed gradually through many minor changes rather than appearing suddenly. This gradual process supports the idea that both natural and sexual selection can drive the evolution of intricate structures, with each intermediate step providing some advantage or appeal. Quote 203. The males of Polyplectron are no doubt beautiful birds, but their beauty, when viewed from a little distance, cannot be compared with that of the peacock. While Polyplectron birds exhibit impressive plumage, Darwin acknowledges that their beauty pales in comparison to that of the peacock when observed from afar. This comparison emphasizes the extreme degree of sexual selection in peafowls, where the evolution of extravagant features like the peacock's tail serves as a striking example of mate attraction. Quote 204. As the secondary plumes became lengthened through sexual selection, and as the elliptic ornaments increased in diameter, their colors apparently became less bright. That as the tail feathers of certain birds evolved to become longer and more adorned through sexual selection, the intensity of their colors seemed to diminish. This observation suggests that changes in one trait, such as feather length or pattern, can influence other aspects, like coloration, in the evolutionary development of secondary sexual characteristics. Quote 205. From the light afforded by the principle of gradation, we can sometimes indicate, with a certain amount of confidence, the probable steps by which the males have acquired their brilliant plumage and Darwin emphasizes the usefulness of observing gradual changes in species to understand how males developed elaborate features over time. The concept of gradual modification allows scientists to hypothesize the evolutionary pathways that led to the present forms of these ornate and striking characteristics, often driven by sexual selection pressures. Quote 206. But can this be so confidently said of sexual selection? Seeing in how many ways the tail feathers of hummingbirds differ, why should not the 4 central feathers have varied in this one species alone, so as to have acquired white tips? Darwin raises the possibility that sexual selection, rather than natural selection, could account for the distinct variations seen in specific hummingbird species. He suggests that the unique development of the white-tipped feathers might have occurred gradually or abruptly, and been favored through sexual selection due to their aesthetic appeal. This showcases how sexual selection can drive the evolution of distinct traits that serve to enhance an individual's attractiveness. Quote 207. If this be admitted, we can perceive that the males, which during former times were decked in the most elegant and novel manner, would have gained an advantage, not in the ordinary struggle for life, but in rivalry with other males. Here, Darwin argues that males with more elaborate and unique ornaments would have had a better chance of success in mating competitions. This advantage arises not from survival benefits, but from being preferred by females or outcompeting other males. The emphasis is on the role of sexual selection in shaping traits that provide an edge in reproductive success rather than direct survival. Quote 208. In my Origin of Species, I briefly suggested that the long tail of the peacock would be inconvenient and the conspicuous black color of the male capercailzie dangerous to the female during the period of incubation. Darwin reflects on his earlier suggestion that certain male traits, like the peacock's long tail or the capercailzie's black coloration, could pose risks if inherited by females, especially during vulnerable periods such as incubation. This idea hints at the possibility that natural selection might limit the transmission of certain characteristics to males only, to prevent harm to the females during crucial life stages. Quote 209. It is conceivable that the slaty females might acquire so strong a latent tendency to pale blueness that they would not destroy this color in their male offspring, their female offspring still inheriting the slaty tint. Darwin proposes that, over time, females could develop a latent tendency for a certain color, which would be passed on to male offspring without affecting the females themselves. This explanation illustrates the of inheritance and how certain traits can be expressed in one sex while remaining dormant or latent in the other, influencing sexual dimorphism. Quote 210. The female hornbill, Buceros, for instance, of India and Africa, is protected during incubation with extraordinary care. Yet female hornbills are not more conspicuously colored than many other birds of equal size, which build open nests. Darwin observes that despite the hornbill's protective nesting habits, which could theoretically allow for more conspicuous coloration, female hornbills remain relatively dull in appearance. This challenges the notion that protection alone dictates female coloration, suggesting that other factors, possibly sexual selection or the laws of inheritance, play a role in the evolution of plumage. Quote 211. With parrots, which likewise build in holes, we find analogous cases. In most of the species, both sexes are brilliantly colored and indistinguishable, but in not a few species, the males are colored rather more vividly than the females, or even very differently from them. Darwin notes the variation in sexual coloration among parrot species, where some show little difference between males and females, while others have males with more vivid colors. This variability suggests that sexual selection operates differently across species, leading to diverse outcomes in sexual dimorphism, influenced by both natural selection and mating preferences. Quote 2-12. The immature plumage in relation to the character of the plumage in both sexes when adult, 6 classes of cases. Darwin discusses the relationship between the plumage of young birds and their adult forms, categorizing these differences into 6 classes. This detailed classification provides insights into how plumage evolves through sexual and natural selection, with variations inherited either by both sexes or limited to one. This exploration helps to explain why certain species exhibit specific colors and patterns at different stages of their life cycle. Quote 213. The principle of inheritance at corresponding ages need not here be discussed, as enough has already been said on the subject. Darwin references the concept of inheritance at corresponding ages, which implies that certain traits appear in offspring at the same developmental stage as in their parents. By acknowledging this principle, Darwin suggests that the evolution of physical characteristics, like plumage in birds, can be influenced by when traits are inherited, thereby impacting how species adapt over generations. Quote 214. With animals of all kinds, when the adults differ in color from the young, and the colors of the latter are not, as far as we can see, of any special service, they may generally be attributed, like various embryological structures, to the retention of a former character. Darwin suggests that the differing colors between young and adult animals may often be remnants of ancestral traits rather than serving a particular function. This idea implies that some characteristics observed in juvenile forms might be vestiges of an earlier evolutionary stage, highlighting the continuity and complexity of evolution in animal species. Quote 215. In many groups of birds, the plumage is differently colored in the several species, yet certain spots, marks, or stripes are retained by all. This quote points out that while bird species can exhibit diverse colorations, some patterns or markings are consistently preserved across different species. These retained features indicate a shared evolutionary heritage and suggest that certain traits may have had significant importance in the past, possibly relating to identification, camouflage, or attraction. Quote 216. When the sexes of birds differ in color, it is interesting to determine whether the males alone have been modified by sexual selection, the females having been left unchanged, or only partially and indirectly thus changed. Darwin questions whether the color differences between male and female birds are due to sexual selection acting solely on males, with females remaining largely unaffected. This exploration addresses the intricate dynamics of sexual dimorphism and the varying impact of sexual selection on both sexes, offering a deeper understanding of the evolutionary processes behind these differences. Quote 217. The most probable view appears to be that successive variations in brightness or in other ornamental characters occurring in the males at a rather late period of life have alone been preserved. Darwin posits that the evolution of ornamental traits, such as bright plumage, most likely arose through variations in males at later life stages. These variations, favored by sexual selection, were then passed down to male offspring. This hypothesis underscores the role of sexual selection in developing male-specific characteristics that enhance mating success, while potentially being absent in females. Quote 218. Some of the differences between the females of closely allied species may be attributed to the direct or definite action of the conditions of life. Here, Darwin acknowledges that environmental factors can directly influence differences between females of closely related species. While sexual selection often shapes the evolution of traits, this quote highlights the possibility that natural selection and the conditions of life also play a significant role in defining species characteristics, particularly in females who might not be as influenced by sexual selection as males. Quote 219. The males varied whilst young, and transmitted their variations to their offspring of both sexes, is the most probable. Darwin suggests that it is most likely that male birds underwent variations in their plumage at a young age, and passed these traits to both male and female offspring. This idea reflects the concept of inheritance, where traits developed in one sex, typically males, can become a characteristic of the entire species over successive generations, influencing both the appearance and behavior of the species. Quote 220. The plumage of certain birds goes on increasing in beauty during many years after they are fully mature. Darwin observes that some birds, such as peacocks and certain herons, continue to develop more elaborate and beautiful plumage long after reaching sexual maturity. This ongoing enhancement suggests that sexual selection not only shapes traits for immediate reproductive advantage, but also drives the continuous development of ornamental features, possibly increasing the bird's attractiveness to potential mates throughout its life. Quote 221. In some cases, mere novelty appears to have acted as a charm. Darwin proposes that the appeal of novelty in male birds might influence female mate selection, leading to the evolution of varied traits. This implies that female preference can sometimes favor new and unique features in males, driving sexual selection not only toward specific traits, but also toward variability and change, contributing to the diversity of appearances in bird species. Quote 222. It is impossible to decide which of these three modes has generally prevailed throughout the present class of cases. Darwin acknowledges the difficulty in determining the specific mechanisms behind how sexual dimorphism in birds evolved. The complexity arises from various potential pathways for how traits could be inherited and expressed, illustrating the intricate interplay of genetics, sexual selection, and environmental factors in shaping the characteristics of different species. Quote 223. The period of variability seems often to have been the determining cause. Darwin notes that the timing of when variations occur in birds often influences how those traits are inherited. If a variation appears late in life, it might be passed on differently than one that manifests early. This observation suggests that the age at which a trait emerges plays a significant role in its transmission and may explain the differences in characteristics between the young and adults of the same species. Quote 224. We may infer that the beauty of our existing species, if we look to the whole class, has been largely increased since that period, of which the immature plumage gives us an indirect record. Darwin infers that the current beauty of bird species has increased over time, with the less vivid plumage of juveniles serving as a record of their evolutionary past. This insight implies that the ornamental features seen in adult birds today have been gradually enhanced through sexual selection, resulting in the diverse and striking displays that characterize many species. Quote 225. With mammals, the male appears to win the female much more through the law of battle than through the display of his charms. Darwin states that in the animal kingdom, male mammals often secure mates through combat rather than through courtship displays. This observation emphasizes the importance of physical strength and fighting ability in the reproductive success of many mammalian species. It suggests that traits related to combat, such as size, strength, and specialized weapons like horns or tusks, have been favored by sexual selection. Quote 226. All male animals which are furnished with special weapons for fighting are well known to engage in fierce battles. This quote underscores that many male animals equipped with unique weapons, such as horns, antlers, or tusks, commonly engage in intense conflicts. These battles play a critical role in sexual selection, as winning fights often grants males access to females and mating opportunities. Consequently, these specialized weapons have evolved to enhance the male's competitiveness during such encounters. Quote 227. When the males are provided with weapons which in the females are absent, there can be hardly a doubt that these serve for fighting with other males, and that they were acquired through sexual selection. Darwin highlights that in species where males possess distinct weapons not found in females, these traits are likely products of sexual selection. The presence of these weapons indicates their utility in male-male combat for mating rights. Over time, sexual selection has shaped these physical characteristics to improve a male's chances of reproductive success. Quote 228. With mammals, when, as is often the case, the sexes differ in size, the males are almost always larger and stronger. This observation notes the phenomenon of sexual dimorphism in mammals, where males are typically larger and stronger than females. The increased size and strength in males are often associated with their need to compete for mates, suggesting that sexual selection has driven the evolution of these traits to improve the male's chances in combat or dominance. Quote 229. Tusks and horns are manifestly of high importance to their possessors, for their development consumes much organized matter. Darwin points out that the development of tusks and horns requires a significant amount of resources, indicating their vital importance to the animals that possess them. This investment in such structures suggests that they provide a substantial advantage, likely in combat for mating rights, justifying the cost to the individual's overall fitness. Quote 230. It is much more probable that the females are allured or excited by particular males, who possess certain characters in a higher degree than other males. But what these characters are, we can seldom or never discover with certainty. That female mammals might select mates based on specific traits that make some males more appealing than others. However, the exact nature of these traits often remains unclear. This idea introduces the concept of female choice in sexual selection, suggesting that while male competition is important, female preferences also significantly shape the evolution of secondary sexual characteristics. Quote 231. Quadrupeds use their voices for various purposes, as a signal of danger as a call from one member of a troop to another, or from the mother to her lost offspring, or from the latter for protection to their mother. Darwin notes that quadrupeds, four-legged animals, use vocalizations for communication in various situations, such as signaling danger, locating troop members, or calling for protection. This variety in vocal usage underscores the social and survival mechanisms within different species, showcasing how voice plays a multifaceted role beyond just mating or sexual selection. Quote 232. Almost all male animals use their voices much more during the rutting season than at any other time. Darwin observes that males in many animal species are more vocal during the breeding season. This increased vocal activity is likely related to sexual selection, as males use their calls to attract females or compete with rivals, indicating that vocalization is a critical aspect of their reproductive behavior. Quote 233. It is possible that the roaring of the lion may be of some service to him by striking terror into his adversary. For when enraged, he likewise erects his mane, and thus instinctively tries to make himself appear as terrible as possible. Darwin suggests that the lion's roar might serve as a display of power to intimidate opponents, with the accompanying erection of the mane enhancing this effect. This behavior demonstrates how vocalization, coupled with physical displays, can function as a strategy to establish dominance and deter potential threats. Quote 234. Some writers suggest that the bellowing serves as a call to the female, but the experienced observers above quoted inform me that female deer do not search for the male, though the males search eagerly for the females. Darwin presents the idea that the bellowing of male deer may not necessarily attract females, as females do not actively seek out males. Instead, males search for females, indicating that these vocalizations might serve other functions, such as signaling presence or warding off rivals, rather than directly luring mates. Quote 235. If we could believe that the male had the power to excite or allure the female by his voice, the periodical enlargement of his vocal organs would be intelligible on the principle of sexual selection. Darwin speculates that if males could attract females through vocal displays, the seasonal enlargement of their vocal organs would make sense as a result of sexual selection. This idea links physical changes, such as increased vocal organ size, to mating strategies, emphasizing the potential role of vocal traits in reproductive success. Quote 236. The rank effluvium of the male goat is well known, and that of certain male deer is wonderfully strong and persistent. Darwin mentions the strong odors produced by male goats and some male deer, which become more pronounced during the breeding season. This phenomenon suggests that scent may play a role in sexual selection, possibly helping males signal their presence, status, or readiness to mate, thereby attracting females or marking territory. Quote 237. With some monkeys, the beard is confined to the male, as in the orang, or is much larger in the male than in the female, as in the Mycetes caraya and Pithecia satanas. Darwin points out that in some monkey species, beards are either exclusive to males or significantly larger in males than in females. This sexual dimorphism in facial hair likely results from sexual selection, where features such as beards could enhance a male's appeal or display dominance within the species. Quote 238. Such study as I have been able to give to nature makes me believe that parts or organs which are highly developed were acquired at some period for a special purpose. Darwin suggests that the development of specific body parts, like ornamental hair or other unique features, likely evolved for particular purposes. These purposes could include attracting mates, signaling social status, or other functions related to survival and reproduction, indicating a complex interplay of natural and sexual selection in shaping species characteristics. Quote 239. In both classes, the male is almost always more vividly or strongly colored than the female, and is ornamented with larger crests of hair or feathers or other such appendages. Darwin points out that in mammals and birds, males typically exhibit brighter colors and more prominent physical features, such as larger crests of hair or feathers. This observation suggests that sexual selection has favored the evolution of vivid colors and ornamental traits in males, likely because these characteristics make them more attractive to females or help them compete with other males. Quote 240. Quadrupeds manifestly take notice of color. Darwin asserts that mammals, like other animals, are aware of and influenced by colors. This suggests that coloration plays a role in their behavior, potentially in social interactions, mating choices, or even in territorial disputes. The ability to notice color may drive the evolution of certain traits, as animals with advantageous coloration might have better success in reproduction or dominance. Quote 241. We should bear in mind that these colors do not appear in the male at birth, but only at or near maturity, and that unlike ordinary variations, they are lost if the male be emasculated. Darwin observes that in some species, males develop vivid coloration only as they approach maturity, and this coloration can disappear if they are emasculated. This implies a strong link between sexual maturity, reproductive status, and the development of ornamental features, reinforcing the idea that such traits have evolved through sexual selection as indicators of fitness and reproductive viability. Quote 242. It is on the whole probable that the strongly marked colors and other ornamental characters of male quadrupeds are beneficial to them in their rivalry with other males, and have consequently been acquired through sexual selection. Darwin suggests that the bright colors and ornamental traits seen in male mammals are advantageous in competition with other males for mates. These features, developed through sexual selection, signal health, strength, and genetic fitness, giving males an edge in attracting females and securing reproductive opportunities. Quote 243. In these and many other monkeys, the beauty and singular arrangement of their colors, and still more the diversified and elegant arrangement of the crests and tufts of hair on their heads, force the conviction on my mind that these characters have been acquired through sexual selection exclusively as ornaments. Darwin describes the striking and varied coloration, along with unique hair patterns in monkeys, concluding that these traits likely evolved through sexual selection. The elaborate and ornamental nature of these features suggests they play a significant role in attracting mates, reinforcing the idea that sexual selection drives the evolution of physical beauty in primates. Quote 244. There is, however, a striking parallelism between mammals and birds in all their secondary sexual characters, namely in their weapons for fighting with rival males, in their ornamental appendages, and in their colors. Darwin notes that mammals and birds share similar secondary sexual traits, including weapons like horns or spurs, ornamental features, and vivid coloration. This parallel suggests that sexual selection has consistently shaped the evolution of these features across different animal groups, emphasizing its importance in the development of physical traits related to competition and mating. Quote 245. In regions where snow never lies for long, a white coat would be injurious. Consequently, species of this color are extremely rare in the hotter parts of the world. Darwin points out that white coloration, which offers camouflage in snowy environments, would be disadvantageous in warmer regions. Therefore, animals in these areas rarely exhibit white coats. This observation highlights how natural selection, based on environmental factors, shapes the coloration of species for survival and protection. Quote 246. When both sexes are colored in the same manner, and the colors are conspicuous or curiously arranged, without being of the least apparent use as a protection, and especially when they are associated with various other ornamental appendages, we are led by analogy to the same conclusion, namely, that they have been acquired through sexual selection. Darwin suggests that when both male and female members of a species exhibit bright and intricate colors, which do not serve a protective purpose, these traits are likely the result of sexual selection. The presence of such characteristics in both sexes implies that these features evolved to enhance attractiveness rather than for survival, pointing to the influence of mate preferences in shaping physical traits. Quote 247. Man on an average is considerably taller, heavier, and stronger than woman, with squarer shoulders and more plainly pronounced muscles. Darwin notes the physical differences between men and women, emphasizing that men typically possess greater height, weight, and muscle mass. These distinctions are likely the result of both natural and sexual selection, where traits such as size and strength could have been advantageous in survival, hunting, and competition for mates. Quote 248. With mankind, the differences between the sexes are greater than in most of the quadrumana, but not so great as in some, for instance, the mandrill. Darwin points out that sexual dimorphism in humans is more pronounced than in many other primates, but not as extreme as in some species like the mandrill. This observation underscores the diversity of sexual selection's impact across different species, including humans, where physical and behavioral differences between the sexes have evolved in varying degrees. Quote 249. In regard to color, the newborn Negro child is reddish nut brown, which soon becomes slaty gray, the black color being fully developed within a year in the Sudan, but not until 3 years in Egypt. Darwin describes the changes in skin color observed in newborns of different races, noting how pigmentation develops over time. This progression suggests that the characteristics we see in adult skin color are influenced by both genetic factors and developmental changes, possibly linked to environmental adaptations and evolutionary history. Quote 250. There can be little doubt that the greater size and strength of man, in comparison with woman, together with his broader shoulders, more developed muscles, rugged outline of body, his greater courage and pugnacity, are all due in chief part to inheritance from his half-human male ancestors. Darwin proposes that the physical and behavioral attributes seen in men, such as size, strength, and boldness, are inherited from early male ancestors. These traits likely evolved through sexual selection, as males who exhibited such characteristics would have had a competitive advantage in both survival and securing mates, passing on these traits to future generations. Quote 251. Man is the rival of other men. He delights in competition, and this leads to ambition, which passes too easily into selfishness. Darwin remarks on the competitive nature of men, which stems from rivalry and the pursuit of ambition. This competitive drive could be linked to sexual selection, as historically, males who succeeded in competition had better chances of securing resources and reproductive opportunities, shaping certain psychological traits over time. Quote 252. The law of the equal transmission of characters to both sexes, as far as color and other ornaments are concerned, has prevailed far more extensively with mammals than with birds. Darwin observes that in mammals, unlike birds, ornamental traits such as color are more evenly transmitted to both sexes. This difference suggests that sexual selection operates in various ways across species, with some animals developing traits that are specific to one sex, while others retain features across both genders. Quote 253. Music arouses in us various emotions, but not the more terrible ones of horror, fear, rage, etc. It awakens the gentler feelings of tenderness and love, which readily pass into devotion. Darwin suggests that music evokes emotions that are typically associated with tenderness, love, and even devotion, rather than those linked to aggression or fear. This idea highlights the role of music in human emotional expression and social bonding. Darwin implies that the roots of musical ability in humans could be traced back to our ancestors, where it possibly played a role in courtship and social interactions, reinforcing connections between individuals. Quote 254. As the males of several quadrumanous animals have their vocal organs much more developed than in the females, it appears probable that the progenitors of man endeavored to charm each other with musical notes and rhythm. Darwin speculates that the evolution of vocal capabilities in early human ancestors similar to some primates, might have served a purpose in courtship. He suggests that before the development of articulate language, early humans may have used music and rhythmic sounds as a form of communication to attract mates, thus influencing the development of vocal organs in both sexes. Quote 255. The influence of beauty in determining the marriages of mankind. We are chiefly concerned with primeval times, and our only means of forming a judgment on this subject is to study the habits of existing semi-civilized and savage nations. Darwin emphasizes the role of physical beauty in human mate selection, particularly in early human societies. By examining contemporary practices among various cultures, he aims to understand how preferences for certain physical characteristics might have influenced sexual selection throughout human history, contributing to the diversity of human features. Quote 256. The hair is treated with especial care in various countries. It is allowed to grow to full length, so as to reach the ground, or is combed into a compact frizzled mop, which is the Papuan's pride and glory. Darwin notes that hair care and styling practices vary across cultures, with long hair or specific hair arrangements often being a source of pride and seen as an attribute of beauty. This attention to hair suggests that it plays a significant role in cultural expressions of identity and attractiveness, indicating how sexual selection can drive the evolution of grooming practices. Quote 257. The same fashions in modifying the shape of the head, in ornamenting the hair, in painting, tattooing, in perforating the nose, lips, or ears, in removing or filing the teeth, etc., now prevail, and have long prevailed, in the most distant quarters of the world. Darwin points out the widespread and long-standing human practices of body modification for aesthetic purposes across different cultures. These modifications reflect a shared human desire to alter physical appearance, often to conform to cultural standards of beauty. This universal inclination toward self-adornment and modification underscores the importance of physical traits in social and sexual selection. Quote 258. The senses of man and of the lower animals seem to be so constituted that brilliant colors and certain forms, as well as harmonious and rhythmical sounds, give pleasure and are called beautiful. But why this should be so, we know not. Darwin acknowledges that both humans and animals find certain colors, shapes, and sounds appealing, but he admits the underlying reason for this sense of beauty is not fully understood. This sense of aesthetics might be linked to evolutionary processes, where traits associated with beauty could signal health, fitness, or desirability, thereby influencing mate selection. Quote 259. It is certainly not true that there is in the mind of man any universal standard of beauty with respect to the human body. Darwin argues that human standards of beauty vary significantly across cultures and societies, with each group having its own unique preferences. This variability suggests that what is considered attractive is largely influenced by cultural norms and individual experiences rather than a universally fixed standard, highlighting the role of sexual selection in shaping diverse ideals of beauty. Quote 260. Men accustomed to a nearly oval face, to straight and regular features, and to bright colors, admire, as we Europeans know, these points when strongly developed. Darwin points out that standards of beauty are influenced by cultural familiarity. Europeans, for example, often admire faces with certain features, such as an oval shape and bright colors. This preference suggests that beauty is not universal, but rather shaped by the characteristics to which a group is regularly exposed, resulting in the selection of mates who possess these admired features. Quote 261. The different races would be differently modified, as each has its own standard of beauty. Darwin argues that the unique standards of beauty among different races lead to variations in physical characteristics. Over time, the traits deemed attractive within a specific race become more pronounced due to sexual selection. This diversity in beauty standards demonstrates how cultural and social preferences contribute to the distinct appearance of various human populations. Quote 262. Civilized men are largely attracted by the mental charms of women, by their wealth, and especially by their social position. Darwin observes that in civilized societies, sexual selection is not solely based on physical beauty, but also influenced by factors like intellect, wealth, and social status. This shift suggests that human mate selection has become more complex, extending beyond mere physical traits to include qualities that affect social standing and prosperity. Quote 263. It has always been our custom to pick out our worst-looking slaves and to sell them. Here, Darwin references a statement from the Jollof tribe in Africa to highlight the practice of selective breeding based on physical appearance. By choosing to sell those deemed less attractive, the tribe influences the overall appearance of its population. This conscious selection underscores how societal customs and decisions can shape the physical traits of a group over generations. Quote 264. There can be no sexual selection, and no effect will be produced on the offspring by certain individuals having had an advantage over others in their courtship. Darwin implies that in societies with communal marriages or promiscuous relationships, sexual selection is weakened because there is no clear preference exerted in mate choice. Without the ability to select partners based on desirable traits, variations in offspring may not reflect any specific characteristics, thus limiting the influence of sexual selection on the population's evolution. Quote 265. Man is more powerful in body and mind than woman, and in the savage state, he keeps her in a far more abject state of bondage than does the male of any other animal. Darwin remarks on the historical physical and mental dominance of men over women, particularly in primitive societies. This power dynamic has likely influenced sexual selection, as men had the opportunity to choose their partners based on their preferences, shaping the characteristics passed on to future generations. Quote 266. Women are everywhere conscious of the value of their own beauty, and when they have the means, they take more delight in decorating themselves with all sorts of ornaments than do men. Darwin notes that women tend to recognize the importance of physical attractiveness and often use ornaments to enhance their beauty. This behavior suggests that women, aware of being subjects of sexual selection, actively engage in practices to appeal to potential partners, thus perpetuating certain aesthetic traits within their societies. Quote 267. The greater intellectual vigor and power of invention in man is probably due to natural selection, combined with the inherited effects of habit. Darwin proposes that men's superior intellectual capabilities have evolved through natural selection and habitual use. Men who were better at problem-solving, hunting, and defending their families likely had an advantage in survival and reproduction. Over time, these traits became more prevalent in the population due to their adaptive value. The Descent of Man by Charles Darwin concludes by affirming the fundamental unity of life, emphasizing that humans are not separate from the processes that shape all living beings, but are part of the same evolutionary continuum. Darwin underscores the role of natural and sexual selection in shaping human development, ultimately arguing that the differences between humans and other animals are of degree, not of kind. He encourages readers to understand human evolution as an extension of the same natural laws that govern the rest of the biological world. The book remains a compelling argument for the interconnectedness of all life, reshaping our view of humanity's place in nature.
Curious to dive into the mind of Charles Darwin? With StudyLab Pro's Book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of the Descent of Man in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.